every city you burn, I'm gonna build one high.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and it is April 14th, YC125, and this is the Eve Universe Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. That's a spoiler, kind of. How's it going, guys? It is the Eve Universe Show. It is our Friday show, and we have a lot to cover. So we're going to jump into it pretty soon, but first I wanted to just say hi to everybody. And I wanted to give everybody a few updates, okay? We actually didn't go over a lot of updates yesterday, so I kind of want to go back over some of the stuff. But also, I just wanted to give you guys an update. I know a lot of you are concerned with my guinea pigs. My guinea pigs, as some of you may know, I got 2 new guinea pigs a few months ago. But then tragically, we discovered that they actually have a very rare and unique condition that makes them require not just food and water for sustenance, but also likes, comments, and subscribes on the YouTube channel. So we've been asking everybody to please do your part and make sure to like the videos and all that stuff. And you know what? You guys have been doing a pretty good job. Here you go. Ready? So here's Midnight, and he really wants to thank you guys. Thank you guys for all of the wonderful likes and comments and subscriptions that you guys have been giving. That gives them the food that they need to eat or to survive. Such a weird disease. I know, it's tragic. But you know what? We care for them anyways. But as you can see, he's big, he's healthy. Just wanted to give that update. Show off my guinea. One of 2. The other one's still in there. Midnight's the one I like to... I'll happily throw out likes for the cute pets. Exactly, see? It's worth it. Alright, guys. Now, yesterday we went over... basically the events leading up to the Empyrean Age and a little bit beyond. That would be the events of YC110, which is about 2008, or late YC110. Well, yeah, YC110 and early YC111. And you know, that was all fun and good. And we stopped off at the Caroline Star, or not the Caroline Star, but the Apocrypha event. And that is where we're going to pick up today. Do I have everything typed wrong in the I typed it out. I noticed that it was wrong right before I went live, and so I typed out a correction, and I must have... Yep, I typed it too quickly. Thanks for the catch. All right, it's fixed. All right. Before we go into that, though... we should go over the latest events from the latest update for the event. As you guys can see, things are kind of going on pretty steady at this point. The Caldari have continued to have their lead. I feel like we're progressing at about the same pace, but they've been getting their big old spikes. So we have seen some smaller spikes from the Caldari or from the Gallente. But overall, once again, we see slow or, you know, pretty smooth paced progression from the Gallente on both sides of the coin, whereas we see kind of sporadic jumps followed by kind of longer stretches with a lot of the other empires. The Caldari are clearly one of the more motivated besides the Gallente. Overall, the Gallente have obviously done more progress total, although actually, no, wait. That's not even true anymore. The Caldari have officially done more in raw percentage than even the Gallente. That is the power of raw wallets and dedication, my friends. Faction, what do I feel about faction warfare groups joining... what do I feel about nullsec groups joining faction warfare? First of all, we've been dealing with that for a while. We've been dealing with Test has joined the state at least a couple times now. I think that the Horde joined the state at one point. You know, historically, actually, a lot of null groups, when they do come to faction warfare, do go to Caldari because that allows them to go to Jita and all that kind of stuff. That said, I think that this is a consequence of its success, right? We cannot have faction warfare be the best it can be and also be exclusive, right? Like, everything that changed about faction warfare was designed to make it more attractive and more accessible. So when you do that, you're going to get everybody interested in it, including null blocks. That's just a consequence of it. And we're just going to have to see how this continues to play out as the empires, both player and NPC, continue to vie for control. Test is not a nullsec group. When Test first joined faction warfare back in like a long time ago, years ago, they were a nullsec group. But my point is that we have definitely seen, I mean, like, this isn't the first time we've seen null groups come in. And honestly, like, it's just bigger organized groups. The thing about faction warfare is, as long as we don't have like LP taxing and stuff like that, faction warfare is a place that like a lot of people want to be part of, but a lot of groups don't, because there's no real good top level income, right? Like, it's a good thing for your players to go do, but it's not so great for the actual institution itself, right? So I can't imagine that these null blocks will be like long term wanting to promote these things. Rather, it's more like a vested interest in different empires. Maybe different null groups might align themselves with factions more in the same way that like Pi and Urshikon have. The other thing about that is that like the more people that are involved in faction warfare, the more fights there are and all that sort of stuff. I mean, like, overall, I've noticed that the population in faction warfare space has gotten so high that it's actually like now difficult to go around and do things because there's just so many people and so many gate camps and so many everything. You know, the cost of success, as it were, and you just have to adjust your strategies accordingly. All right, William. Welcome, welcome. DM me if you don't get somebody to talk to you pretty soon. I bet that null blocks want the ships from the LP store, but care more about their SOV than the state of the war zone. Well, yeah, but I mean, like, we all know about, like, IS per LP, right? And, like, faction warfare blueprints that I mine myself are not free. But all that to say is that it's still a cost-benefit analysis. They're doing it via going to faction warfare because it's better than doing it via their normal methods and then buying, you know, like, if they could rat and just get a PNI, they probably would, right? Like, the point is that it also is providing a lot of good content for their people at a time where they may not be able to create that much content, especially with so many things going on with wars and stuff like that. Oftentimes, armies will actually, like, alliances will actually find alternative things for players to do counterintuitively, just to make it so that, like, morale doesn't deepen too, you know, doesn't fall too deep. We would be going out on frigs and spamming sites is way more efficient. Well, yeah, but I mean, that's content. So that's good, right? You're being convinced to do the thing that is good for everybody. Been trying to solo in faction warfare, and no, the stink of it is null corps can switch and change factions as it suits. Well, yeah, I mean, like, well, it takes them 24 hours, just like anybody else. But I mean, I've done plenty of soloing in faction warfare. It's just, you know, you have to pay attention to where the war fronts are. I generally like to go to command outposts when I'm looking for, if I'm not, like, with a fleet. Also, as a solo pilot, I like to go and do the hacking sites as a way of kind of helping my cause. Anywho, let's see. Anything else? There is a starter pack sale. So these starter packs are already a pretty decent deal. And then with these saves, they're just a better deal. Now, these packs do get refreshed every once in a while. So this could be a potential clue that they're going to refresh it again. I don't know. I do find it interesting that the discount actually goes down as the price goes up, which is kind of weird. But yeah, I don't really have much to say about this besides if you've been looking to get one of these, or if you are like starting out in EVE, these are definitely worth considering. All of them are pretty good. And then for the community beat that we got today, they talked about how Needs to Be Real and Hateless has recently passed away. And to honor that, you know, obviously Capsuleers did what they did, but then CCP has now added Needs to Be Real's signature Navy Slicer fit and several of Hateless's favorite ship fits to the in-game community fittings. Now, Hateless is actually was such a big member of the community that several of his fits were already in the community fittings folder. So it's, in my opinion, yeah, I will be honest, I don't know Needs to Be Real as much, but as far as Hateless is concerned, I think that this is a fitting tribute, and I think that this is something that would make him really smile. Wormhole Town Hall by Mark Resurrectus and other people. I haven't quite checked that one out yet. There's a writing contest. There's new Alliance logos, including the Aderon Robotics logo. Eve New Orleans is coming out in the second half of April. I don't know if CCP is going to be there or anything. And then a Twitch streamer that I've never heard of. Somebody tell me if he's good. Should I check him out? All right. That's it for kind of the news. Oh, right. And then finally this, which is we received a new launcher yesterday. I think it says one per account per starter pack. Oh, I'm gonna go put Midnight away. So everybody say goodbye to Midnight. I'm gonna put him back in his cage. The good news is my new cat is so chill that, like, I don't think she's even noticed them. This makes me so sad. Oh, yeah. Oh, Dajat, you didn't know? Jesus. Okay. Well, I hate to be the one that breaks this news to you, but yeah, Hateless got into a motorcycle accident. I think a drunk driver hit him. So he's been taken from us. What was he nibbling down? We give him little, well, carrot sticks and broccoli and stuff. Okay. So, the new launcher. Yeah, Hateless was awesome. I met him in real life. He's a good dude. You know, I actually haven't gotten to talk very much about Hateless since his passing. I didn't make it to the memorial because I couldn't deal with it that day. But Hateless was a good... I like to think of Hateless as a pretty good friend and a good dude. I met him at Vegas, and the thing that I don't think that people realize about Hateless, especially with, you know, a lot of the drama with the gankers and the PvE and all that kind of stuff that came out, I don't think that people quite appreciated how much Hateless struggled with social anxiety, or just like being able to be out there and functional and being with people. I think he had an insulin pump and some other things. Like, he had to struggle really hard just to be able to go to Vegas. And I remember that was a big deal. And so, like, yeah, he was a great dude. And I don't think anybody truly knows or appreciates the amount of effort and work and heart he put into making all that happen. So To Hateless, cheers. I'll see you on the other side, buddy. Okay. Now then, with all that out of the way, I appreciate you guys giving me a chance to say those things. You know, they have the biggest fireworks visuals. Sorry for the Eve loss. Yeah. I watched the stuff from years ago, and the content was always quality. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like, I used to joke around and say that watching Hateless is the best way to learn how to make and lose the most money in Eve. I can't deal with this right now. I'm sorry, Dajat. I'm sorry. We're gonna try to move on. We've got a lot of things to cover, and my only defense is you'd want me to. So here we are. The new launcher beta. So this is kind of wild. There is a new launcher that is out. It is very early testing, as we can see. There's some good things about it. There's some concerns I have about it. I have heard nothing but great feedback about it. In fact, I think I'm the only person that I've heard give any kind of criticism whatsoever. So, apparently my new cat has taken on the tradition of my old cat of attacking my green screen, so that's cool. So, one of the biggest advantages of the new launcher is the idea that you can now interact with your characters on an individual level, not just as as an account, right? So I have the launcher open. Here is my launcher. In reality, we have, first of all, I'll be honest with you. This feels very cluttered, and this also feels very, I hate to say it, but it really feels like a free-to-play launcher, right? Doesn't it? I don't know. I know other people have given that criticism about the old launcher too, but I don't know. There's something about this where it's like there's so many different blocks. There's this column, there's this column, but then this column is like divided into two, and then this division of two has two. It's just, it feels like there's a lot. There's a lot going on here. I don't know about junk or ads, because like this is the same thing as it was before. I don't see anything necessarily as far as ads or whatever. The character select has to be a little bit bigger, obviously, because of everything. Because you have to select individual characters. Like when you select an account, it lets you select an individual character. And then you can just hit play now. And what it'll do is it'll actually just launch in and immediately select the character and log in. Now, I have a problem with this because, you know, I often have a bunch of alpha characters. And one of the things I do, especially like during login events, is that like I'll have a special launch profile where I launch like all of my clients in potato mode. So that way I can just go through them all and redeem, close, redeem, close, redeem, close, redeem, close, right? Obviously, if everything just logs into the character itself, you can't do that anymore because, you know, your one alpha logs in and nothing else can be logged in. So there is a way to do this by going here to the game client and then checking always go to character selection, which will make it always go to character selection. Sorry. I had been told by CCP during the mass test that this could be tied to the launcher group, but I haven't figured out how to do that if that's possible. If you could do that, then I think that would be great. That would get rid of this entire complaint, because I can set up launcher groups, and if I could tie it to the profile instead of to the entire client, then I think that would be very helpful, right? Because then I could like choose all of my different accounts. Although I wish I could just be like, and character select screen. Maybe that would be the way to do it. Like just say character select screen here. Or can I just do this? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Does that work? Can this work? Hold on. Let's go. No, wait, no, don't pick anything. Can I just launch the main launcher group? And just launch that one without a character selected? Have they added copying overview settings to all characters? I don't think so. In fact, I actually found it more difficult to set up settings than before. We'll talk about that in a second too. Oh my god, it worked. Okay. All right. Sweet. Excellent. 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 Sorry I didn't show you. But if you go into your launcher group, this is how to do this now. If you go into your launcher group and you simply do not pick a character, since it says optional, it even says optional. I'm dumb. So you could make a launcher group with all your groups, all your things that launch into that. And you can also make the new character profile or client. You can still do client profiles per launcher group, which is really good. Profiles are useful because they're basically like complete instances of your settings. So like I used to have a logic profile and a combat profile. So that way everything, my overviews, my broadcasts, everything was different when I was flying logi. I lost all my profiles a while back and never actually reconstructed them. But you can actually create new profiles now by going here and going to account settings and changing the profile. However, I don't think... There used to be a way to customize all of your profiles, including like making copies of them. And I don't see the ability to do that right now. It's like, yeah. I can make a new one, but I can't like copy an old one. Yeah. So better profile management would be nice. On top of that, we do, of course, have all these things that are coming soon. I don't know what this box is supposed to be. I feel like this image over here is taking up a lot of room without actually communicating anything. Notifications, fine. Offers. So this is going to be your ads section, which is kind of weird that it's like a tab that's not shown. You would think that they would want the ads like shoved in your face. And then over here, we've got news archive. So I don't know. I assume that this is like your notification feed for your character, maybe. And then this is like the main news feed, which brings me to my biggest complaint about this entire thing, which is that this is yet another launcher without any lore or in-universe update section. There's no New Eden news. There's no headlines. There's no anything like that. It might show up in the news posts like this. But it'd be really nice for there to be a good highlight for like the latest scope news or the latest something, like New Eden news, something that gets people to head towards the universe portal, because not enough people know about that. So yeah. Let's see. As far as Frontlines goes, since you guys are talking about that. Maybe? There we go. Let's see. We've got 19. So we've gone up one system. What do we get? Onato. Oh, yeah, we got Ugali's and Frary. That's awesome. Recapturing Ugali's. You know, I am anxiously awaiting the next New Eden news, because Ugali's falling should definitely be somehow interesting to the New Eden news, given what was already happening there. Do you recommend joining the beta for the launcher? I mean, I haven't had any problems with it. Other than that one piece of like feature parity of the setting up profiles better. And, you know, that's fairly niche. Assuming that you don't need that, I think that it's just, from what I've heard from everybody, it's just universally better. Check Aranako. Oh, yeah. This system's vulnerable. Excellent. We continue to progress. And then Devon and... oh, we gotta work on Fleet, man. All right. You keep your old launcher anyways. That's true. I actually can launch both launchers. It's a totally separate thing. Snuff keeps ruining everything. I mean, some things are constant. Hey, I did read that, and you have a fantastic day as well. All right. Anything else we want to go over before we jump into the main topic of the day? The launcher isn't something I would have said urgently needs improvement, but I really like where it's taking it. Yeah, but the other thing about launchers are that, well, if we go back to the video, to the conversation about it, it says, what did it say? In addition to improving security and performance. So the reason why I bring this up is because, like, the launcher is intimately tied with the actual game itself, because it passes the credentials on to the game of which character you're selecting. Well, originally which account you're logging into, and now which character you're selecting. Remember that the old launcher was built before you could even log out of your character. So session tokens have been changed pretty significantly since then. And I imagine that part of this is because they're kind of rebuilding it with that new idea, you know, this new paradigm in mind. So it's very possible that the newness of it comes more from, especially since it's like a side thing, it comes from the fact that they're trying to update more of a background thing than just the convenience it is to the end user. The convenience to the end user is just the selling point, if that makes sense. What does the title mean? The moment that changed everything? Today we are talking about the Apocrypha event. Okay. But before we get into the Apocrypha event, as I said yesterday, I think that this is good for now. As we talked about earlier, yesterday we went over the events leading up to the Empyrean Age and whatnot. In fact, what I'd like to do is close off by start off by ending up there. However, I do want to go one step further back, all the way to the beginning. And let's begin today by watching. I have a lot of things to watch and listen to today, okay? So just be ready for that. This is the EVE Universe Origins trailer. So this helps put the tone of, like, the history of EVE. I'm bringing this up because it's occurred to me that a lot of my viewers and a lot of people that are playing EVE don't even realize that we are Capsuleers and what that means. So before we go any deeper into what's about to happen, let's go ahead and check out the EVE Origins trailer that helps us understand, like, what's going on and where our place is.
Earth, the origin of our ancestors. A century had passed since they discovered the Eve Gate. A wormhole. Passage to a remote corner of the universe. New Eden. It was the largest colonization effort in the history of man. The mass settlement of hundreds of strange new worlds. We thought nothing could stop us. After the Eve Gate collapsed, countless colonies perished. The scattered survivors forgot the old world. Fragments of mankind, light years apart, lost contact. Thousands of dark years passed until humanity rose again to be with the stars. In different corners of New Eden, great empires had evolved. 4 different faces of humanity. When they clashed, the wars were merciless. Out of the years of conflict, a new kind of human emerged. One capable of immortal life. To transform into this rare breed, we pay the ultimate price. At the moment of death, our mind is transferred to a fresh clone. We have become immortal. In the sky, we reach farther. On the ground, we strike harder. The empires are losing their grasp on power. And as our age begins to dawn, they will learn to fear us.
Something asks, on the ground? Well, yeah. I mean, like, we've had war clones now for a little while. But we're getting to that. We're getting ahead of ourselves with that one. All right, so... And then also, just to make sure that we are all caught up on the same page, I want to go over the Empyrean Age trailer. So in the Empyrean Age trailer, we see the events that we were talking about yesterday, which is the Mechalin disaster where Alexander Noir crashed into the Mechalin station. We have the use of the Zerafect weapon over Mechios, and we have the attack of the Mimitar to Ulai. Loss of humanity is a big theme in the game.
Cycle of life and death was supposed to end with us. We were to be the start of a new age, a destiny of light, an Empyrean age. Yet these tombs call out to us. All the heroes and villains vanquished within cry out at once, begging for justice. We will fight for what we believe in. We will take a side, and our wrath will be furious. Empyrean Age.
Okay, so what's important here, though, what we're going to focus on here is, it's funny because you can tell exactly which section of this video I and everybody else likes to focus on. So what we're focusing on today is this part right here, where Jamil Sorum's and her super weapon shows up and destroys the Minotaur's fleet with a single shot. With the tool known as the Zera, which has now come to known as the Zera effect weapon, named after the city of Zera on the planet of Mechios in the system of Sorum Prime, the home city of Jamil Sorum, where she showed up. So let's read a description of what we just witnessed. All right. Let's see. Kill her, he shouted in time. Behold, so this is the Minotaur saying, you know, kill her, da 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 da. But then her ship began to glow an eerie and whitish hue. Bolts of lightning encircled the entire vessel from bow to stern as it erupted into a blinding light. The pilot swore he heard the shrieking laughter of a woman. A blue-white lightning lashed out from the radiance, striking the Ragnarok Titan and then arcing like spreading plague to every other ship in the fleet. Blinded by the brilliant flash, the pilot wrenched the control stick backwards, pulling his craft away from the towering capital ship ahead. Horrified to the core of his soul, he watched as the bolt as it left from ship to ship. He saw the bubble auras of the shields coruscate from white to fiery red as their defenses turned inward, directing their repulsive force towards the very hulls that they were designed to protect. Most shattered instantly, while others were left hopelessly crippled. Before the pilot's eyes, the great Ragnarok began to break apart. The cries of a million Minotaur filled the comms channel as panic, despair, and death brought doom to the Elders' task force. Sorum's fleet ranked their deadly beams of fire from ship to ship like soulless executioners, systematically destroying everything that survived in the apocalyptic attack. As the bolt lashed out towards him, the pilot cursed God with every shred of hate in his soul. And this occurred at 002905 on this day. Can't remember the exact day. All right, so that is the Zera effect weapon, which is this incredibly advanced weapon system that uses a material known as Isogen 5. Isogen 5 is a rare mineral, which we will talk about in a little bit. We'll be talking about quite a bit. Actually, the next thing to happen... Well, actually, let's go back to YC 111. March. This is where we left off yesterday. The first indications that anything unusual might happen in YC 111-310 were a series of communication disruptions early in the day. First, there came a report that travel delays in Salian system, Essence region, caused by the disruption of the system's Cassandra solar weather monitoring network. Shortly after this, contact was lost with an ore survey expedition in 3HQC TAC 6 system in Outer Ring region. Of course, nobody connected the two incidents, happening as they did so far apart, and occasional disruptions of the kind were hardly unknown. An entire planet dropping out of contact was, on the other hand, rather unusual, and when the FTL link with the planet of Salian 1 and the rest of the Gallente Federation was inexplicably lost, it caused real concern. With planetary FTL fluid routers typically being among the most secure and hardened installations, and Salian 1 were reported to be located several kilometers beneath the surface of the planet, the sudden loss of contact seemed to be mysterious and worrying enough for the Gallente president, Soro Foratan, to order the mobilization of so-called tripwire defenses across the border separating the Federation from the Caldari state. Justified as a precautionary measure, the mobilization nevertheless triggered an response in kind from the Caldari, and as their forces adopted a heightened defensive posture along the border. Within the hour, Caldari State Executor Tibus Heth had issued a statement in which he said that the Caldari deployment was purely in response to the activation of the Gallente border forces and denied the presence of any Caldari forces in the vicinity of Salen. When communications with Salen 1 was restored a half an hour later, all emergency channels immediately flooded with planetary distress calls, with distress signals originating from all four primary cities of the planet, Lodecor, Metal City, Southern Cross, and Valamor. It became clear that planetary communication systems had restarted autonomously following a protective shutdown against an external threat. With the cities of the barren mining planet all located underground, speculation as to the nature of the threat was widespread and only fueled by continuing distress calls, many calling for the evacuation of the planet. Speculation turned to alarm when the automated distress signal from the ground-level installation of Salian 1 indicated a possible nuclear attack underway. With Concord and Federation warships scrambling for the system, authorities called for calm and refused to confirm that an attack had been launched, noting that early warning systems could be triggered by other environmental effects aside from a nuclear strike. However, further distress signals from Sylian indicated that many injuries consistent with exposure of high level of radiation were being reported. And the first messages received were determined to have originated from the daytime side of Sylian 1 near the city of Lodkor, although communications with the day side of the planet were reportedly being routed through an underground links to the night side. Direct communications with dayside cities and installations remained massively disrupted and eventually effectively impossible. With radiation burns and poisoning continuing to be reported, it became clear that a radiological event had taken place, and fear that a nuclear attack had been carried out continued to grow. These fears were allayed somewhat when a scientist at a hastily arranged emergency conference in Boreans declared a solar radiological pulse originating from a powerful blue sun of Sylian's system was the cause of the catastrophe. The University of Kali conference further ruled out any kind of military attack or nuclear strike, noting that no weapons available to any state in the cluster could have delivered almost instantaneous planetary-wide devastation, reaching into the deep subterranean cities of Sylian 1. While this may have been regarded as good news by some, the scientists were not sanguine about their chances for survival of anyone caught on the surface of the planet, and even more ominously, were unable to rule out the possibility that Sylian had gone nova. Even though the O-class star would have been expected to enter the post-main sequence period for another million years, the evidence was that the planet had been doused in massive bursts of ultraviolet light and high-energy particles consistent with a nova or similar solar event. While the events of Sylian were ongoing, the scope reported that the Thukker Great Caravan had been reporting missing in the Great Wildlands region after passing through SL-Tech YBS system. For one of a vast hundred of ship-long Great Caravans to simply disappear was so unusual that the Thukker were reported to be urgently consulting with the Mimitar Republic Samatar Malatu Shakor. Additionally, Outer Rings excavation confirmed that their deep core survey expedition operating in 3HQ C-Tech 6 system had been lost. Most significantly, the team had been working on the first planet of the system and reported a, quote, possible nuclear strike on other radiological pulse weapon, end quote, detonation near the location shortly before all contact with them was lost. The similarities with the Sylian event was lost on no one, and Orr immediately began sharing data with the scientists at Boreans. As panic began to spread throughout the Gallente Federation, one serious incident became a stampede at the Orsoret 3 Federation Navy Testing Facility Station. The first Federation and Concord warships arrived in orbit at Sylian 1. They were met by a scene of devastation, and Concord officials confirmed that a natural disaster of unprecedented scale and consequences had occurred. The Federation Navy announced that it was bringing in dropship squadrons for evacuation of the wounded by carrier, and that many other capital ships and freighters were en route to bring supplies and intending to operate as orbital triage centers. Shortly after the arrival of the warships to Sylian, President Soro Forotan and the Concord Chief of Staff Kivas Odaka held a joint news conference confirming that the radiological pulse had emanated from the sun of Sylian system and the impact of Sylian 1. The statement confirmed that Cassandra weather monitoring system had gone offline at 8:41 EST, following the shutdown of the fluid routers in Sylian 1 at 8:49 EST. Apparently, the pulse strikes the planet at 8:59 EST. Communications with the city of Southern Cross were restored, and it had been determined that the pulse had disabled the planetary communications network, incapacitated the global power grid, and destroyed nearly or heavily damaged any equipment on or below the surface of the planet to a depth of 20 meters. Importantly, President Forotan emphasized that the pulse was not an attack by any nation, but appeared to be a singular solar event with an unknown cause. Given the high level of damage, he issued an executive order to evacuate Sylian 1 and had appointed Grand Admiral Attison Ranchel to oversee the operation. Concord forces would be assisting in the evacuation, that dropships would be ferrying evacuees from the night side of the cities of Southern Cross and Valamore to the cities of Lodestone. Lodkor and Metal City would not be directly evacuated, and citizens were advised to use magrail lines operating on backup power to reach nightside cities. As the magnitude of the events of Sylian became understood, together with few indications that the solar radiological pulse was by no means an isolated occurrence, so did panic rise within New Eden. As the Gallente Federation, increasing numbers of crowds, panics, incidents were reported, and stock markets began to fluctuate. In particular, the stock prices of the Gallente mining sector tumbled as the impact of the loss of Sylian 1, a major Federation mining planet, began to be felt. In the Caldari state, many citizens in colonies along the border of the Federation began to take emergency shelters on the outskirts of cities and other settlements. Fear of war with the Federation appeared to be the main reason for this flight to the shelters, and the authorities in some colonies were reported to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of people flooding in. Oh, we're getting there, LM1. No, because this is before the Drifters. We'll get to Drifters in a little bit. Remember, Cassandra was So Cassandra was in the Helen of Troy story. Cassandra was this prophetess that was cursed to never be believed. While the wider reaction appeared to become more hysterical, the situation on Salient 1 lurched into chaos despite the presence of many freighters and capital vessels operating as medical triage centers and support ships for squadrons of dropships. The rush of Salient 1's inhabitants to get off the devastated world soon resulted in tragedy, as 2 overloaded Federation Navy dropships collided on takeoff, killing all aboard and many in the waiting crowds of refugees. An estimated 4,000 were killed in this disaster. Federation Marines were quick to move in and place cordons around all loading bays to establish order, prevent further overloadings of dropships. The desperation of the crowds only intensified as distress signals and footage for the horrors of Salient 1, particularly from the Dayside cities, were received and retransmitted in their hundreds across the planet and beyond. Despite the extraordinary news of the Serpentis Corporation, despite its long-lasting enmity with the Federation, sending medical equipment and personnel to Salient, alongside specialized evacuation and rescue equipment from OR, the overall situation appeared to worsen by the minute. When the scope obtained and transmitted a feed of the President 410 imploring the people of Metal City and Lodecor to use the Magrail system to move to safety, rather than wait to be rescued, it became clear that the effort to evacuate some 500 million inhabitants from the planet was becoming increasingly desperate. In response to the crisis, the Gallente Charity Renin Relief, itself based in the Essence region, announced an emergency aid in response to Salient 1. The charity dispatched all of its available assets to Salient, with several freighters laden with medical and other supplies sent on its way to the stricken planet. Elsewhere in New Eden, a rather less charitable response due to the tragic event of Salient came from the Amar Empire, when a fundamentalist group, the God's Righteousness Conclave, transmitted a statement calling the solar event God's Cleansing Fire, claiming the disaster to be foretold by Scripture. The Conclave claimed that it was a consequence of heresy and a vengeance upon the Gallente Federation, describing it as a heretic nation. Late in the morning by standard time, more evidence of the wider and more profound nature of the events of the day came to light as the Intaki Syndicate Bureau Station at 16 AU from the Sun at 35 TAC RK9 system was struck by a radiological pulse. This was the third confirmed solar event of this type to occur within the morning. Fortunately, the considerable distance of the station from the Sun appeared to result in the pulse hitting the station with much less strongly, and shields were reported to have held, despite the many electrical and electronic systems being knocked out. As this news was being digested, the scope broke the story that Concord probes investigating the Salient Sun had disappeared and apparently been destroyed on approach to the star. The DED was reporting as having detained the journalists breaking the story, and Concord itself refused to discuss the story or confirm the detention of the reporter. Despite the clear and increased evidence that Salient had been the site of an extraordinary yet naturally occurring event that was not even isolated, anti-Caldari demonstration began to flare up across the Federation. Even the statements of President 410 had not been enough to allay the fears and dispel suspicions among many that the Caldari had struck at the Federation using a diabolical new weapon. Perhaps mindful of his words would not be enough, as well as requiring more ships to relieve Salient, President 410 soon recalled the Federation Navy ships deployed along the border with the Caldari state. The Caldari, for their part, made no immediate move to mirror this action. In a sign of increasing tendency to blame any unusual occurrence on the mysterious but deadly new phenomena apparently afflicting stars across the cluster, the Amar Navy reported contact had been lost with one of their scout patrols on the border system of the Cormonen caused some consternation. The local Navy commander placed his fleet on high alert, and this in turn triggered the matched response from the Republic fleet vessels in neighboring Aga. Which, remember, Aga is now the hottest zone in the Amar Mimitar war zone. However, within the hour of contact with the patrol had been reestablished and the ships recovered with no loss and seemingly having suffered nothing akin to the radiological pulses reported elsewhere in New Eden, no hostile action by any nation or military forces was evident on the Amar Mimitar border, but both sides remained at high alert following the incident. On Salient 1, the situation continued to deteriorate. Shortly after noon EST, the Magrail link between Lodecor and Southern Cross failed, trapping thousands of refugees in deep underground and making the job of evacuating Lodecor vastly more difficult. Rescue teams on Salient 1 described the situation as hell, and was reported that many rescuers were receiving high doses of radiation while working on the planet. Radiation poisoning was the subject of leaked radio communications by a Federation disaster relief official. The official was heard saying that, quote, "They're dead already, they just don't know it," end quote, in reference to survivors from the day on the day side of the planet showing signs of receiving high doses of radiation. The grim prospect of evacuation of people doomed to die anyways transfixed news audiences across New Eden. In the Minmatar Republic, the disappearance of the Great Caravan, later revealed to be the important Lakat Hro caravan, took precedence over all. Senator Malatu Shakur announced that the ability of the Republic to respond to the Sylian disaster was minimal, while Republic fleet assets were diverted in the search for the missing Great Caravan. Coordinating the efforts to find the caravan, last known to be an SL Tech YBS system, the Trust Partners Cooperation organized a huge effort of Republic and Thukker ships to quarter a large volume of space centered on the last checkpoint made by the Lakat Hro caravan. Many more Republic squadrons were sent to this effort as Minmatar forces on recovering their Thukker brethren. Elsewhere, with the empires perhaps concerned for their religious radicals of the gods' righteous conclave not to be seen to speak for Amar, the office of the Imperial Chancellor Articio Corazor issued a communique offering assistance to the Gallente Federation at the order of Empress Jamil I. While this communique stated that natural phenomena are the work of God, it took the line that Sylian event was a test of faith rather than divine punishment, as the Conclave had asserted. In a rather pungent twist, the fleet recently removed from Royal Heir Uriam Kador's control, a fleet that had invaded Gallente Federation less than 6 months before, was placed in 30-minute notice to provide assistance should President Foratens request it. On the planet of Valor 7, anti-Caldari protesters were dispersed by local police as they turned to throwing stones at the Caldari consulate. The police used tear gas and sonic grenades to disperse the rioters before the situation got out of control. Authorities assured the citizenry that the Sylian events were not attributed to the Caldari state, and peace was swiftly restored. Notwithstanding the anti-Caldari flare-ups of the Federation, Caldari State Executor Tibus Heth finally responded to the withdrawal of the Federation warships from the border by standing down the Caldari Navy from its heightened defensive posture. The Caldari State also repeated an offer to assist the Federation. The Federation Stock Exchange and Luminaire ceased trading until further notice in the afternoon, as it became clear that the turbulence of the morning trading session would continue without intervention. Meanwhile, the Gallente Federation's emergency infrastructure braced itself for a severe overload as refugees from Sylian 1 began shipping away from the planet and out of the system. The biggest concern among disaster management officials was the very large number of people suffering from various degrees of irradiation. Concerns grew that, if the populations of radiation poisoning seen among the relatively few evacuated thus far held true for the entire population, existing stockpiles of radiation treatment drugs would be totally inadequate. Unfortunately, all concerns over coping with 500 million evacuees were eclipsed at the news of large superheated mass heading towards Sylian 1. So those were the ships. Yes, these are the same ships that attacked Solitude are now on standby to help. The shocking story also revealed that Concord was tracking the mass and established a 0 hour or time of impact by which all ships were ordered to leave the vicinity of the planet. The scope broke the news despite attempts by Concord to suppress the facts and detention of several of the news agency's staff. The news that a potentially world-shattering plasma wave was approaching the planet of Sylian 1 sent Sylian 1 into mass panic. Some spaceports were forced to cease handling dropships as bordering gantries were overrun, in some cases collapsed, as hysterical crowds fought for space aboard transports off the planet. Concord condemned the scope for publishing the news and called Chief Editor Lars Kjorman's report impetus, inflammatory, and irresponsible. Despite the panic among the many residents, several journalists trapped on the Sylian reported that the deepest city caverns in eerie calm had descended. Many citizens had apparently resigned themselves to their fate and decided to spend their last moments alive in peace, enjoying the company of their loved ones. With news agencies broadcasting emotional farewell messages to their staff and continuing their carry reports on an oncoming plasma wave, Concord and the Federation Navy ceased to cooperate with journalists. The approximate count of Sylian 1 residents safely evacuated by this time, early afternoon EST, was 843,000. With scientists openly speculating on the nature of the superheated mass rushing towards Sylian 1, with most concluding that a vast plasma wave had been unleashed from the system's sun, the desperation of the planet increased. It was reported that the Federation Marines had opened fire on the crowds attempting to rush dropships at the spaceports remaining open and able to service evacuation transports. Outrage was provoked by the evacuation of convicted prisoners off the planet while millions and millions of innocent civilians remained below. the withdrawal of starships from Salient 1 orbit began, with medical vessels and triage centers moving off. Rodent shipyards and Creodrone announced that they had hardened the defenses of their stations in Salient, but would remain open for docking as long as possible. With it noted that full defensive measures would require the stations seal and deny all traffic, Concord and the Federation Navy declined to comment on the safety of the stations. By 1430 EST, it was clear that the mass exodus of the ships away from the orbit of Salient 1 and out of the system was underway. The scope reported that the news-gathering vessels were fired on by Federation Navy warships as they attempted to defy system-wide evacuation orders. These ships left the system under duress, but were able to report that all dropships that had left Salient 1 with planetary evacuations had effectively ended. Blockades of entry points into Salient from the ancient adjacent systems of Aparelli, Ani, and Metzerel were placed by large formations of Concord ships. 0 hour had arrived. Shortly after 1435 EST, all contact with Salient system was lost as the stargates leading to the system were shut down. Fluid router signals out of the system were interrupted, and all automated distress signals from Salient 1 abruptly ceased. In the face of this terrible silence, a dreadful realization dawned across New Eden. With the blockade of Salient being maintained by Concord as a precaution, other developments across the cluster came into the fore. Scimitar Malatu Shakur announced the destruction of the Thukker Great Caravan Lakat Hro, and confirmed that a solar event similar to the scale and power of that described in Salient had been the cause of the loss. This announcement had brought the number of near-simultaneous main-sequence solar anomalies occurring that day to 4. This evidence of a cluster-wide phenomena underway only stoked the already heightened popular fear of an Armageddon-style catastrophe affecting all of New Eden. To the repugnance of many, God's righteous conclave had issued a faith statement warning of dire consequences for those assisting the populations of Salient 1. The conclave claimed that, quote, those lost in the Salient system shall serve as a stark reminder of both the glory and power of God, end quote. The Amar government refused to comment on the statement and referred all reporters to the official position of the Empress and the offer of support made by the Empire to the Federation. Of more profound importance was the warning issued by the Servant Sisters of Eve that they had detected signs of unstable wormhole formation throughout the New Eden cluster. The sisters claimed that multiple instances of defect-mediated turbulence in the fabric of space-time had been detected in various locations throughout the cluster, and went on to note that the sightings coincided with the erratic behavior of multiple star systems all throughout New Eden. In layman's terms, the reclusive humanitarian and scientific organization was saying that they were forecasting the formation of many wormholes across New Eden, and this formation appeared to coincide with the stellar events, such as those witnessed in Salient and at least 3 other systems that day. That and the sisters referred to as many unreported events of a type that caused some consternation, but the sisters addressed the dangers of the wormholes themselves, calling on Concord to issue travel warnings to avoid such wormholes. With their expertise in the field based on many decades of research into the Eve Gate and related matters, the Servant Sisters were taken very seriously indeed. Shortly after 1530 EST, the Concord and Federation forces guarding Salient entry gates lifted the blockade while warning ships not to approach Salient 1 itself. Within minutes after the confirmation by probes of the status of Salient 1, Gallente President Soro 410 addressed the Federation and announced the total loss of planet due to main sequence anomaly affecting the system's sun. Yes, this is the story of how wormholes got made. No, this is from 2009. This is the Salient disaster. This is how wormholes happened. With only 1 million or so inhabitants evacuated from the planet, the president announced the death of 500 million on Salient 1 with effective destruction as a stable body. 410 accepted the responsibility for the decision to withhold information during the evacuation and confirmed that the order to detain reporters had been his own. Chief editor Lars Kiroman was said to be released, but had not been seen since. The scope soon established a live feed from the remnants of Salient 1. The scene showed clearly that a plasma wave had passed through the area and showed the planet remained slowly coalescing back into a sphere. Massive fragments of ejecta were seen in orbit around the center of gravity, and Capsuleers noted inspecting the remains of a dead world, despite Concord's warning of extreme danger. Concord also warned of the dangers of wormholes after confirming for itself that, quote, topological space-time defects, end quote, predicted by the Sisters of Eve were indeed wormholes appearing across the New Eden cluster. While technically unstable, in that these wormholes appeared to be short-lived and subject to mass transfer effects, these tunnels through space-time were reported to be sufficiently stable structurally to enable vessels to traverse them. Concord declared itself unable to protect those entering such portals and announced an unenforceable travel ban to discourage pilots from exploring the wormholes. All right. So that is the Salient disaster. Okay. So let's look at it a little bit more closely. That's the overview of what happened. We have a series of chronicles and other things to look at about this. First of all, we're going to look at the Apocrypha trailer. The Apocrypha trailer is going to be in video format, what we just read. Ready? Right, creepy. So in order to fully understand this, we also should go back and look at the actual chronicles involved in this. Now, there is actually a series of chronicles that are called The Spiral, Half a Life, End of the World 1, The Great Harvest, We Humans, World on Fire. So, thankfully, I get to take a break from reading everything because a friend of mine from the Eve Reader podcast has already done all of these. Okay? So, we're going to start with The Spiral. Now, the reason why I think it's important to go back to this is because, remember, like, what we're seeing now in the Precursor Crisis are all reflections of this stuff. This is the stuff that started it all. So I think that to understand the different people's positions and what's going on, especially when it comes to Rogue Drones, Blood Raiders, Sisters of Eve, etc., these stories definitely illuminate quite a bit. So let's look at it. And while we do that, I will close this and show the beautiful Salian 1 in front of us. And run an ad. Baha.
Hello and welcome to the Eve Reader podcast. My name is Zendane and this is episode 4, The End of the World, chapter 1, The Spiral. This is a spiral we're in, a long wave undulating in one constant direction without ever crashing on the shore. Listen. I sat with them in the mess hall of our new ship. Some of these people I had worked with for years, others were new to me and had joined as parts of a process that now felt like a procession. Everything leads you to where you are. I was a member of the Sanctuary, a corporation that belonged to the benevolent Sisters of Eve. While the Sisters as a whole concerned themselves with the betterment of mankind, their sub-factions went about achieving that goal in entirely different ways. The Sisters of Eve Corporation, which was the largest part of the Sisters of Eve faction, consisted of rescue workers and aid specialists, and all in all were the exact kind of people you wanted to see in the aftermath of a cataclysm. The Food Relief Corporation, meanwhile, concerned itself with the bureaucracy of aid and had a tendency to extend its reach into diplomatic matters. The last of the sister faction corporations, my own home and the domain of my calling, was the Sanctuary, They were a scientifically focused organization working within a faith-based dominion, and the combined focus of secular inquiry and religious discipline led a particular fervor to their work. Their focus was the Eve Gate, a wormhole that had collapsed onto itself thousands of years ago and left humanity stranded in New Eden. In recent times, a massive interstellar war that cost innumerable lives had also seen an increase in activity at the Eve Gate. A team, led by me, had been investigating this new anomaly and had eventually uncovered a strange signature, as if the gate were responding to something elsewhere in the cosmos. The signature
One more time. So, see, I can see out of the corner of my eye when, like, a whole bunch of things start flipping by. That's when I can see it. Anywho, you know, I have gotten permission from Zendane to use his work, thankfully, especially if I cite him in Eve Reader podcast for doing it, and, of course, CCP for writing them. And also, I wanted to point out that, like, so sometimes we talk about whether or not the Sisters of Eve are good or bad, and this is kind of where that comes into focus, where there's like there are good branches of the sister, there's humanitarian branches of the Sisters of Eve, and then there's like these increasingly shady branches of Sisters of Eve within the sanctuary. Okay?
was unrelated to any previous data and was thus discounted by most serious researchers. But I felt this was worth looking into. I believe that everything happened for a reason, and that the Great Gate would not grant me this single key unless it had something to unlock. It took a lot of patience, which sometimes ran dry, and energy, which was often used up, but eventually I made the connection. Many things had been happening when the gate started to pulsate, but one of the more notable events was the Minmatar invasion of Amar space and the re-emergence of heir Jamail Sarum, who repelled the invaders at her doorstep. The conflict, which had seen a massive fleet of warships torn to shreds, was shrouded in mystery and rumor. Some said Jamail had merely willed the Minmatar ships to explode, others that the fabled Minmatar elders had seen their invasion brought to a halt and had enacted a suicide pact. There were rumors of an Amar superweapon couched inside an Abaddon battleship, but nothing had been proven and no public data was available. Whatever it was, the invasion event coincided with a spike in Eve Gate activity. Moreover, once I had carefully picked apart the scant data on record from that monumentous day in the skies above Mekaios, I discovered traces of that very same signature found in the Eve Gate. The two were connected, I reasoned. The two must be connected. I knew I was onto something. Acquiring a small vessel and a few stores of investigative equipment, I started a research experiment to determine whether the anomalous signature could be found anywhere else in New Eden. Despite the scant evidence I had to work with, I had to fight the constant urge to bring the entirety of my corporation on board. The further I traveled along this dark new road, the more certain I was that I had been set on it for some reason that would eventually involve the fate of all my brothers. That certainty was only compounded when I traveled to Mekaios and found not only clear traces of that signature, but indicators of where else it may be found. Those indicators took the form of tiny rips in space, little pockets of anomaly where the laws of physics were turned inside out. They were too small to affect the ships that passed through them, and much too volatile to be of any use for scientific study. But there they were, present, insomuch as the window to another world can be said to exist at all, and like my own titanium faith, a similar window to another world of strange wonders, they led inexorably to my ultimate goal.
So the residual of the weapon is
like
these
starry
tears in
lights,
space-time.
the little rips led me on a brief and hair-raising series of excursions, but only once did I risk losing the trail. It was on a jaunt into the deeps of Blood Raider space. The Blood Raiders, a gruesome and spacefaring sect of blood-worshipping cult called the Sani Sabek, had been involved in an assault on a station there, and little pools of anti-reality eddied around the place. It was as if the trail led in several different directions.
The reason why this is because before attacking at Mekaios, she first experimented with the weapon by attacking the Blood Raiders. I think to rescue Phalanx Grange, if I remember correctly.
one of whom seemed to go only deeper into the abyss of the Blood Raider world. I briefly considered following it, but resisted the temptation and set my gaze on a safe trail that led back into Empire space again. There would be time enough to traverse the darker roads. That trail led me to the High Faithful, the court of the Amarr Empire. Despite our differences, I could not help but respect these people and their immense power their faith had granted them. Their presence in this world was impressive too. Colossal ships hovered past me in every direction, the golden sheen of their hulls reflecting the fire of the sun. In the distance I could glimpse the Empress' home at the Family Academy station in Amarr, and the caravans docking there bore the insignia and banners of high royalty. It made me wistful for something I couldn't explain, not a past that I missed, for the paths of my ancestry had never crossed those of the high royalty, but perhaps a future that might hold a greater glory than I had ever imagined. So I thought intently and formulated a plan, and I snuck my ship into the holiest of holies apparently undetected, looking with manic fervor for something I did not yet understand, and, I increasingly feared, might not even be recognized if I found it. The signature was there, but so were guard ships, and while I trusted my sister's reputation to get me at least through the outer circles of Amarr security, I was certain that at some point I would find myself in the unwilling company of armed men with little inclination to do anything but ask me stern questions at gunpoint, much less grant me open passage. I sampled what data I could, my minute vessel dwarfed by the warships that idled by, and I got out in the assured belief that my presence there had not been noted or understood. Back at the Sisters' base, I spent several days and nights crunching the data, fueled by the blinding fire of a righteous faith in my cause. I eventually found that I'd been close to the source already. The latest data indicated that the signature was most present in the star system T-TAC IPZB, the depths of Blood Raider territory. It was a frightening and ecstatic moment to realize that the trail went ever on and would lead me into the darkest of space, but I believed in myself and in this. To mount an expedition into Blood Raider space would require a proper crew on a proper ship outfitted with the equipment and supplies necessary for such a hazardous venture. It would also require official permission, which I duly requested and which was summarily denied. I was crushed, reduced to ashes and dust. My visions of a grand future, though barely formed, threatened to unravel already. The world was in the midst of interstellar war, and while they respected the rights of the sanctuary workers to continue their scientific inquiries, there were no ships, supplies, or anything else that they could spare to that effect. It was absolutely ridiculous, and it would have been laughable were it not so tragic. I could feel the spiral of events, this path I was on, curl and turn into a noose. I knew exactly where I needed to go, and I even had some inkling of the why, a tenuous why, certainly, but I had faith and I knew it was a necessary thing. In my desperation, I started sharing information with anyone who would listen. I kept the destination to myself, but let enough slip that people knew I had an extremely important mission to undertake, one that involved the Eve Gate, the Blood Raiders, and very possibly the truth of what happened on that fateful day of the Minmatar invasion. And just like that, the noose relaxed. It had been like this, always and always, when we wanted to help the people who needed our aid. The world found a way for us, and whatever needed to happen, it made happen for us. I felt blessed and exonerated. I was given a ship, and given the supplies, and granted the crew. I looked over my people. We would go somewhere no one had ever gone, and play our part in the grand scheme. Everything leads you to where you are, I said to them. I gave them my name, and we moved on in faith. This concludes.
All right, that's it. So that is the Sisters of Eve. So this one member of the Servant Sisters of Eve basically becomes obsessed with the Zero Effect weapon and tracking it down. Basically kind of follows the dotted line, tries to get permission, fails to at first, and then continues to, press the matter until able to go again. Next. Half a Life. This is a story from the Blood Raiders' point of view.
Hello, and welcome to the Eve Reader podcast. My name is Zendane, and this is episode 5, End of the World.
One thing I really like about these chronicles is it allows us to get in the head of the individual members of these kinds of organizations.
Chapter 2, Half a Life. Location, Solar System EC TAC P8R. They were finishing up a patrol when they were told of fresh meat. Antar's team had been doing hunt and grab for a while now, and he had become a natural at bleeding his victims. The experience depended on one's training, origins, and constitution. Common wisdom held that anyone who didn't pale and grow nauseated at their first time of hooking up a live body was either perfect for the job or too crazy to be allowed on a spaceship. But for every blood raider, there eventually came a point when, even if the horror of the thing lurked at the back of one's mind, it had become at least a tolerable experience. It was not about the suffering, although that certainly could be part of the process. It was done as much for the victims as for the blood raiders themselves. Antar loved seeing the full spectrum of emotions that they went through, from utter and abject fear, through disgust and hatred and denial, even bargaining and making offers, sometimes stunning offers, all the way to calm acceptance and a quiet, gently fading serenity. He was making them whole at last. He checked the equipment on the ship, which had not been his when he boarded. Vital signs were stable, and the sterilized containers were slowly filling. It was about completing a cycle, really. He mopped off some stray drops of blood and stroked the cooling cheek of one of the people he had met on this journey. Everything was a journey, and it was amazing. He didn't want to reach the end, ever, even though he felt uneasy whenever he wasn't hurtling down the path towards it. The ship had turned so quiet. All Antar heard was a shuffle of his fellow raiders moving about between the donors in repose. He envied those donors. Antar had been one of the Amar Empire's chosen ones, a holder in service of the Lord and the Empire's Chamberlain, and he had thrown himself into the role with fervor. But the part had been only that, a section of the whole, insufficient to fulfill his needs. The more he sought his religion, which was a road without end, the less he felt like a human being. The honor and the faith had granted him only half a life. An encounter with the Chamberlain Karsoth had changed everything, and had given him access to the other side of life. He had discovered not only entire new vistas of existence to explore, of indulgence in sin, of terror and extremity, but...
Remember that Karsoth was the Chamberlain that was kind of in control of the Amar when Jamil shows up, because rather than trying to facilitate another succession trial, he kind of just consolidated power under himself. And then he was eventually executed, I think, right? I think so.
In this new darkness that fed him, he had found completion of the pious side too. At last he could fill in the gaps of good that had been missing all along, giving mercy, for instance, to the victims of the bleeding, or making sure that they could hold their children in their arms during their last moments. It was a work of delicate care, far more so than outsiders might think, which made the message he just received all the more interesting. Antar was told to have his team immediately break rank. They were to take 2 ships and follow a Sisters of Eve vessel that had just departed the Sisters HQ for some unknown destination. They were to shadow this vessel on its journey, making sure not to attract its attention, much less try to harvest it. And they were to go right this minute, leaving the uncompleted bleeding to a replacement vessel that was on its way. Despite Antar's annoyance at leaving a task unfinished, he was excited. Everyone liked the manic thrill of the chase, even if they had to stay hidden. The raiders traded an image, and it was not unheard of for ships to simply stop moving when they arrived on the scene, waiting instead for what they hoped would be a painless death. Others would fight back viciously, and the utter terror in their eyes when the ship was finally boarded gave Antar such an adrenaline rush that he often tasted blood in his mouth. They were used to being a bit more subdued when the sisters were involved. The raiders called the sisters their little hunters, and had learned to heed their movements, tiptoeing around them if necessary. It was a parasitic relationship that greatly shamed them, and it was kept in utter silence among their faction, for which Antar truly pitied them. Where the sisters went, there would be injury and hurt, terror and fire, and there would be blood. Nonetheless, nobody on this committed team liked leaving a task unfinished. Their leaders knew this, and there was a tone of urgency in their new order that registered with Antar. He ignored the grumbles of his team and the whispered pleas of the bleeders, packed up whatever gear he needed, and left the ship to its fate, Soon they were off, the remains of their collective annoyance giving way to the quietly brimming excitement of the chase. And then they ran into the goddamn Thukkers. Location, Solar System GTAC M4I8. One of the captains leading the Thukker tribe protective force was named Khotan, and it was his lot to meet the incoming threat. He was part of a team flying protection for a small caravan of traders and merchants, all on their way to check out the new arrivals in the Great Wildlands. The Thukkers lived on the move, passing from system to system in a great, unending exodus of motion. They were as close to living off the land as anyone could be in this dead wasteland space. Khotan cared greatly about his people.
I wonder if what they're not mentioning here, so they say, check out the new arrivals in the Great Wildlands. This is just after the Apocrypha event, which is when the Lakat Hro caravan disappeared. And so a lot of the members of the Lakat Hro and related were then, that didn't happen to be with the caravan at the time, were kind of displaced. So it's very possible that that's what they're referring to, is after that group vanished, the Thukkers tried to consolidate and recover.
Dangerous quality not many people can say they truly possess, and did not want to see them come to harm. So when he spotted the Blood Raider force in system, he immediately took his team on the offensive. In his mind, the raiders were like leeches, completely impossible to detach once they had sunk their poisonous feelers into the flesh of their prey. Khotan hoped that a powerful offensive would hold them off long enough to save the caravan, or at least keep them from calling in more troops. They started the fight, and...
I'm dumb. You're right. This is before the sailing disaster. I'm dumb.
It was the strangest one Khotan had ever been involved in. The Blood Raiders charged in as they always did, fearless and mad, but their maneuvers were far from the risk-taking insanity Khotan had learned to expect from them, and their laser fire was highly conservative. They immediately locked on to almost all the ships under Khotan's command and started firing, an action that hopelessly spread their cumulative power. Khotan's own vessel found its shields dented somewhat, but nothing of any concern. It got stranger when he pushed on with the offensive. The Blood Raiders took their hits, as they always did, but the moment Khotan managed to down the shields of one of the vessels, that ship would retreat from range even at the cost of its own accuracy. Khotan called in reports from the other ships around him, and they all reported the same situation. The Blood Raiders did not want to fight. They were putting on a show. He ordered his forces to back up and see what happened. The Blood Raiders followed, but retained that strange dispersed attack pattern that still wasn't doing anything at all. They allowed Khotan's people to hit their shield, but not a single dent had been made into their armor so far. And as the Thukker forces retreated, the Blood Raiders still did not move in for the kill. They did not want to be here. There was no other possibility in Khotan's mind. They were on their way to somewhere more important, somewhere that offered bigger rewards than an entire Thukker caravan full of innocent people, and they were putting up a mock fight so the Thukkers wouldn't catch on. Khotan did not like that, nor did he like the realization dawning in his mind that he could not merely fight off these horrors only to go back to protecting his own people. He had seen what happened to those who fell prey to the Blood Raiders, and what remained of them after they had been used up and sucked dry. The thought that they might be on their way to do this to somebody else, no matter who, was too much to bear. At the same time, something else rankled him about this. The Blood Raider force would give anyone a challenging fight, but he had no idea where they were headed, nor who to warn of their arrival. They could have passed him by, and the most he would have done would be to warn the Sisters of Eve, the one force whose mobility came anywhere close to the Thukker tribes, that there might be a bloodbath. But the raiders apparently wanted to continue operating under cloak and darkness. This was wrong, Khotan felt, and it could not be dealt with by using normal means. He resolved to follow. The men and women of the Thukker tribe were trained to handle unforeseen circumstances and encouraged to rely on their judgment and intuition. There was only so much systemization you could nail down in an intangible society such as theirs. Even the most diligent of captains would eventually find him or herself out in the middle of unknown space, faced with a completely unexpected situation, and pressed to make a decision based on insufficient or unreliable data. You did what you needed to do, and you didn't hesitate in taking action. This was being part of the Thukker tribe. The Blood Raiders let their shields drop low, as Khotan knew they would, and eventually retreated. Khotan ordered the other vessels on his team to return to the caravan and protect it, and had his own ship do the same. Once the raiders had nearly dropped out of sight, Khotan ordered his ship swung around and sent a brief note to the caravan leader that he was off to investigate an anomaly. To his surprise, another fighter broke rank and followed him. He sent off a message informing them that they were free to return to the caravan, and the captain of the other ship, who had served with him for a while, replied with a message that stated, quite simply, that they were damn well free to go on wild goose chases too. Khotan grinned at that as he set off to follow the raiders. He had his screen show him the caravan, which slowly disappeared from view as they started their hunt. It felt like he was leaving behind far more than he could ever imagine. This concludes today's reading of End of the
Don't want to talk about it. Let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it. All right. Yeah. Okay. So now we have, God damn it. Now we have, you know, it's a great way to engage chat numbers, which helps out the stream. So it's all a trick. It's all a ruse. No, it does remind me, make sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Yeah, either way. So what we have here is we now have a Sister of Eve scientist and her crew hunting after following the trail of the Zera effect weapon. We have a group of blood raiders that are now basically stalking that Sisters of Eve. And that group of blood raiders were instructed to do so. That's important. The blood raiders were given command from high command to then peel off and go and deal with the Sisters of Eve rather than doing the bleeding that they were doing. Meanwhile, while they were doing that, they of course run into this Thukker tribe caravan. The defenders go in, fight them, realize that this is a weird feint, and so Khotan and a vagabond and one other Thukker guy break off to go kind of shadow the blood raiders. So we have Sisters of Eve being stalked by blood raiders, being shadowed by Thukker. Okay? Cool.
Hello, and welcome to the Eve Reader Podcast. My name is Zendane, and this is Episode 6, End of the World, Chapter 3, 1. Location, Solar System T-TAC IP-ZB. The sisters reached the source of their quest, and found it strange and frightening. One of the navigators called the captain to the bridge. "Sir," he said in a tone as deadly cold as a grinning midnight moon, "I think you want to see this." It was a gargantuan construct. It eclipsed the stars. The captain had never seen anything like it in his life. At some point, there had been rock there, with shards of unrefined ore poking through its surface like shards of bone from an open break. The rock could still be glimpsed, but was completely dwarfed by the intricate architecture of metal and electronics, layers upon layers that interweaved like the veins of a mechanical god, dead or dreaming. The human eye could not take in the entire site at once, nor comprehend each of its components, the nooks and crannies that were nonetheless large enough to house entire battleships, the craggy spikes that jutted everywhere like antennas listening for incomprehensible voices, the blocks that looked like half-built housing for titans, and the walls on every side with thousands and thousands of glittering windows, glowing in the dark with the light of the vast unknowable. It was a station of stations, a collation of superstructures that seemed to constantly reach for the viewer's gaze. The construct took the sisters' speech away, and it was only after they had caught their breath that they realized it was not dead. Not moving, for movement implies life, but inhabited, possessed, and whatever had claimed or made this monster was writhing all over it. They were rogue drones, mad, sentient machines as close to alien life as New Eden had ever seen. They crawled over the surface of the station in the hundreds, constantly mending and altering. As the captain looked away, disgusted and awed in equal measure, he saw hundreds more, possibly thousands, drifting in and out of the station's many openings, and even more still flying to a nearby blue star. A navigator said, "Sir, this is the source. That signature we were after, it's here. That thing, it's full of it." "Keep talking to me," the captain said. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the terrible drones. "What are we looking for? I will not believe it's the drones themselves." The navigator, gratified to have something else to focus on, got busy on his data table. "Sir, the entire hive is a storehouse of a material called Isogen 5. It's remarkable, sir. Quite amazing. Tell me." "The mineral is incredibly rare, sir. I'm only able to identify it by its structure. It's never actually been seen before." "That rare, is it?" "Sir, it was half believed to be only a theory until this point. We know next to nothing about it except that it's incredibly volatile and found only in the presence of Type O stars, blue ones like this one." The captain looked at the star in the distance and sighed. "No, someone else found it first, apparently." "Who, sir?" "Jamail Sarum." The captain tore his gaze away from the camera drone screens and looked at the data the navigator had pulled up for him. The Isogen 5 glowed bright as a furnace in the rogue drone hive, but there were little embers of it floating around nearby. The drones were collecting it, he realized. He had his attention redrawn to the drone hive. His initial disgust was swiftly giving way to amazement and wonder. The drones were picking up the Isogen 5 like harvesters in a field, obeying some law of a nature that was utterly alien to the sisters. Even here, in this place of strange and mad new life, there was order and routine. The captain's confidence returned. He and his team had been brought here to see these sights and to communicate with these entities in mutual humility and brotherhood. "Sir, there is something else. It's only showing up on our scanners because we know to look for it." A tiny red dot hovered in the center of the screen. The crewmen zoomed in and zoomed again, magnifying their view until the entire screen was filled with the glinting surface of the hive wall. The red dot became an outline. It was an Abaddon, an Amarian battleship. "It's on the other side of the station, sir, and it's permanently cloaked, undoubtedly by some power source controlled by the drones. I caught it because it contains a cache of Isogen 5. The captain opened his mouth to ask, but the answer launched itself into his mind like a firework. The realization hit him so hard that he had to grip the railing, his knuckles immediately turning white with the effort. "Sir, are you all right?" He didn't dare believe it yet. It was there, but it couldn't be there.
Remember, at this point, nobody knew exactly what happened. He didn't know exactly what happened. One of the rumors was that Jamail used an Abaddon.
"I want you to confirm a few things for me," he said. "First, the signature we've been after all this time, the one from the Eve Gate, it matches the one in our record of the cataclysmic battle between the Amar and the invasion force of the Minmatar Republic." "Sir, yes. And from my own experimental data, available only to the crew on this ship, this same signature then led me directly to the home court of the Empress herself, and then eventually to this place where we find an Abaddon. Yes, sir? I want you to scan this ship, any way that you can. Tell me if there's anything out of the ordinary with it, other than it being used as a storehouse for Isogen 5. The room was quiet. Everyone sensed that something was happening. After a good long while, the crew member said, "There is, sir. I can't launch proper scan probes that'll get past the drones, but the data seeping from the Abaddon's power systems and our lock on the Isogen 5 signature allowed me to sketch out some of the parts of its interior." "And?" the captain said. "It's like no ship I've ever seen, sir. The interior is one huge mechanism that definitely involves the Isogen 5. There's also several release points built into the forward part of the superstructure. I'm not quite sure what they do. It appears to be some sort of particle technology rigged into the mains. I can't explain their function except they look like hybridized conductors of some sort." "And the Isogen 5 is part of all of this?" "Sir, if I didn't know better, I'd say the Isogen 5 is being used as a fuel for the whole clockwork, or maybe ammunition." The captain breathed deeply. His faith was being rewarded. This was it. The whole thing. The gun, the ammunition, the flame and the fuel, the fabled superweapon and the Isogen 5. It was everything that they needed. "Sir?" He let go of the railing and took a deep breath. "Come with me, Hatanen, and you, Jorah, and Batail." Without so much as raising an eyebrow, the first officer and the navigators got up and followed the captain to a nearby meeting room. The captain waited until they had all gone in and the door had closed. They took their seats at a large table whose plate was made of opaque glass, as many holotables were. The captain called up a smaller version of the main screen and had it projected up from the table. The Abaddon's red outline hovered before his team's eyes. "We have a choice here," the captain said. "Gentlemen, on the other side of the hive is the superweapon Jamal Serum used to repel the Minmatar invasion. It is the largest, most powerful weapon the world has ever known." He paused, surveying his people. "I want it." They did not move or speak, which he took as a good sign. "We obviously need to get past the rogue drones to get it. There is no way we can do this by force, not with our situation. The entire unified power of the sisters might do it if we were lucky and deathless. More likely we would need to pull in other allies, by which time we'd either be enmeshed in an unsolvable diplomatic mess, or the weapon would just simply be gone. It got here somehow, presumably it can disappear just as easily. I want you to consider the nature of this amazing, amazing weapon. It is not the end of life, nothing so dramatic, nor is it merely the biggest cannon in existence. It is the beginning of a new era, of peace and prosperity. It is the leverage we need to bring the empires to hell, them and the murderous capsuleers." He paused and looked each of them in the eyes. "But we all know Control won't see it that way. The moment we involve the faction, the weapon is effectively destroyed. It doesn't matter whether we give it away or manage to keep it for ourselves. Control will see it to it that this magnificent creation of forcible peace will be dismantled. At most, the Food Relief Corps would use it for some momentary diplomatic wrangling, but even they wouldn't fight to keep the thing for long. So we have a super weapon here, and based on the traces of Ice Gen 5 in its core, the same Ice Gen 5 the drones are harvesting, I would say we have found its fuel source. The gun and the bullets within our reach. All we need is our hand on the trigger. Therefore, I want to engage the drones in dialogue." Their eyes went wide. "We will seek passage in the name of the sisters and of humanity, something we have done with great success in the past. No one, not even the bloodiest of the Sani Sabak or the most haunted of Sancha's slaves, has ever denied us passage in times of true need. We were brought here to this place for a reason, and I believe that on the other side, in clear view, is our Holy Grail." He sat down and laced his fingers behind his head. Everything he had said, he felt, was as true as anything ever could be. The weapon needed to be theirs. "Sir," one of the navigators said. He faltered, cleared his throat, and began again. "Sir, I've been on hundreds of missions for the sisters, and this thing, it's death, death incarnate." The captain fixed him with a glare. The other navigator said, "It's frightening, but this is what we signed up for." The first said, "Death and destruction is not what we signed up for." His cheeks were bright red. The second replied, "But this is where we are, and this is the choice that we have to make." The team debated, and the captain allowed it to proceed to a vote. Shortly after, they all left the room, the decision made by majority. Strangely enough, and unknown to the captain, each of the persons inside the room had their own ideas of what would be done to the weapon once it was retrieved, and what would be done to their captain. They went forth and gave their orders. The ship moved in. The drones noticed them and started targeting, but did not yet engage. The crew felt the sinking weight of 100 different red crosshairs aimed directly on them. The team opened a communication channel, and a message made
I love it. This is a reference. This right here is a reference to the fact that the old NPC like indicator. You know how they're like triangles now? They used to be pluses. They used to be crosshairs.
its way from the captain's lips through the ship's computer and was broadcast to all drones in the vicinity. They sought passage in the name of the Sisters of Eve and of the humanity of life, adding that this was not a new occurrence by any means. It explained the nature of their belief, which was rock solid in uncertain times. For good measure, they added a brief history of the sisters' accomplishments, both humanitarian and scientific, concluding with a suitably simplified repetition of the request that the drones acknowledge the sisters' higher purpose and right to passage, and let them through. The message seemed to have no effect. There was no return reply, no acknowledgement, no acceptance. The captain realized with a sinking feeling that these things might never have been asked to give humans passage based on goodwill. He did not even know if goodwill meant anything to them. Eventually, the drones started to move. One of the officers, the one in charge of communication, shook his head. In a tone as steady as he could keep it, the captain asked, "Did they say anything?" The officer gave him a worried look and said, "Sir, I think they did, but I don't know if it's in response to us." "Speak, man. What is it?" The drones were moving closer now, their pincers and claws at the ready. "Sir, it's an endless string of binary. Ones over and over again. Just ones." The first few drones took down the ship's shields like they were wading through fog. The second wave latched on and immediately began piercing its armor with their massive pincers. The vessel's guns picked off one or two, but before any more shots could be fired, the drones had broken through. And the ship's captain learned that faith is not enough, for faith is blind by nature. Life needs insight. It is the dead and the dying that allow themselves to be led. This concludes today's reading of End of the World, Chapter 3, 1. Thank you for listening. If you are interested in the...
Okay, so the Sisters of Eve come up. They attempt to... they find the Abaddon. They find the rogue drones. They go in, and they get ripped apart by the drones because they thought that the drones would have goodwill, and that's silly. So we still have the Blood Raiders, and we still have the Thukker. The important thing that I think is worth thinking about here is why are the rogue drones doing this? We know that the rogue drones have different hives, and different hives have different levels of control, and some rogue drones are more sentient than others. But this facility that they're describing, which, you know, is huge, appears to be controlling the rogue drones. Like, the idea is that these structures collected the Isogen 5 over time and probably using automated bots. And somehow whatever process was doing that has basically taken over the rogue drones and forced them to operate under the same rules. The other thing that's worth thinking about is, remember, at this point, the other absolutely has eyes and ears in normal space. Hey, thanks for that, Ellen. No way. I'm not muted right now. Don't do this. Don't do that. I'm not muted. I can see right there. I'm not muted. Oh my God, I hate you. All right. All right. Well, now I can't believe any of you guys. Troublemakers. Such troublemakers. Okay. So one of my theories has been that the other worked with the rogue drones or through the rogue drones in order to gain power in our space even prior to entering into Jamil. In fact, I suspect that that's how he found them. Now, in the same way that the other taught Jamil about the location and how to use the Zera Effect weapon,
Muted.
it's very possible that the other also exposed them to Isogen 5. Regardless of whether or not it's like some automated AI that took over these rogue drones or the other, either way, the point here is that the rogue drones have been exposed pretty significantly to Isogen 5. The one thing we do know about rogue drones is that they have an immense adaptability. Anytime they're exposed to something, they begin to adapt to it. And while, spoiler alert, this particular hive isn't going to make it, it is very possible that that overall understanding of Isogen 5, that exposure to Isogen 5, or more importantly, the connection to the other, could be infecting other swarms as well, right? And I've long believed that rogue drones have experimented with Isogen 5, which is one of the ways that they are able to travel the way they do. All right, good job. Thank you, Mark. It's good to see you here. You should join Galmil. Why didn't they attack the Abaddon? Well, because they're basically using it as a storage facility. But yeah, Connor, spoiler alert, I think that it's absolutely a great time to join 2023. Monetization, I mean, other people in the channel can speak to it. I mean, the monetization is, at worst, as good as it was before. You know, like, they haven't done any sort of, like, predatory monetary practices. And overall, I think it's been pretty good. One of the problems is that EVE Online has a progression based on time. And while before, this was kind of seen by the player base as being like, okay, well, I got to develop my skills as well as learn the game, and this kind of happens in tandem. Now that you can pay money to gain skill points, it has almost reinterpreted it the player base has reinterpreted this as a paywall, right? Whereas, you know, now you can buy your way into power. So anytime CCP makes any sort of changes, people just state that CCP is doing it to force people to get skill points or whatever. Whereas before, they made the exact same kinds of changes, but no one would have made that accusation because, well, you couldn't buy skill points back then. The thing is that the purchasing of skill points and the various ways of gaining skill points now really functions as a catch-up mechanic. There are both free and paid methods to gain skill points rapidly, which is, you know, kind of important for catch-up. Although, again, I go into this more in the actual in that video. But the point of the matter is that a lot of people are having a lot of fun in EVE. And I would say that you could probably play this game for at least a few months as a completely free-to-play player and be totally fine. And in fact, if you are active and care and like set yourself to learning and making money and getting better, not necessarily making money at first, but like learning and finding what you can do and actually putting like real work into the game, you'll find that actually there's plenty of ways to make enough ISK in-game to be able to buy the Plex to be able to go forward. I do recommend, you know, if you can, just budget out for the $20 a month or whatever for the subscription. Although most people end up having 2 accounts eventually. Just because, honestly, the thing is this. As a free-to-play character and as a person who pays for their account, you basically don't have to worry about, you know, if you try to pay with in-game money, you're basically trying to figure out how to make $2.5 billion every month, and you have to pay this, you know, into that. So the nice thing about being an alpha is that everything you make is yours. You don't have a bill to pay. You're free. So, you know, this is why I recommend alphas stay alphas until you know how you're going to upgrade to Omega and maintain it. Because you can still do basically everything that needs to be happening. You can go with all your fleets. You can hang out with your friends. You can do all the kinds of activities, mostly. Asterisk. You can at least sample some, but all of the combat abilities and stuff like that, like your combat skills are pretty decent. It's mostly just mining and production that ends up suffering for free-to-play accounts. But yeah, no, and as Jacob points out, it's more about your personal story. It's not. The issue is that, like, you can't think of it like a game. It really is, or like a normal video game that you play and beat. It really is like an ongoing living universe that you get to participate in. So the question is, do you want to participate in that? I woke up, I upgraded to Omega by waking up at 7 a.m. and going to work. Yeah, and like I said, like, just like paying your $20 a month makes it so much more easier, because then you're Omega and you don't feel like it's that pressure of like, oh my God, I have to earn money. I have to earn money. I have to earn ISK in order to pay for my Omega and all that stuff that I think lends us to the worst behaviors when it comes to player grind and, you know, maximizing the fun out of our game. Also, yeah, you don't actually need that many skill points to be effective. Skill points are about, like, it's about specialization. And you can make multiple accounts, and using a buddy code, you get 1 million free SP, which is 40 days of skill training. So you can actually, you know, make multiple accounts and then spec them into different things, and then have those multiple skill queues. So that way you can try out different things or you know, whatever, hop between them whenever you want. All right. But like I said, I have a whole, you know, the video about that. Not 20 if you buy in multiple months. Yes, yeah, you can. There's discounts at higher levels, and also if you save, or, you know, there's usually some sort of deal that's happening, or, you know, whatever. All right. Now then, back to the story. Oh, I also find it interesting that, like, one of the things you'll see, especially with the Blood Raiders comment about this too, this weapon kind of becomes like the One Ring of EVE Online, right? Like, everybody who sees it just like just thinks that the power and the you know, gets corrupted by the amount of strength that this thing can bear.
Learning more about the rich history of the EVE universe, please visit the EVE Chronicles
The next is The Great Harvest, Chapter 4. I muted myself to get ready for the show, and then... Look, man, I'm trying.
Hello, and welcome to the Eve Reader Podcast. My name is Zendane, and this is Episode 7, End of the World, Chapter 4.
Like the stream. Make me feel better. Thanks.
Location, Solar System T-TAC IP-ZB. From afar, the Blood Raiders watched the death of their little hunters. The Sisters of Eve ship they had been ordered to trail had sealed its fate at the largest drone hive Antar had ever seen. It was an amazing sight. The sister ship, which had lain still for a while, moved in and was immediately targeted by the drones. A few of those monstrous machines approached it and apparently engaged in some kind of a dialogue. The raiders didn't catch any transmissions, but since the drones hadn't started murdering anyone, Antar reasoned they must be busy keeping up the conversation. Not long after, the drones started moving again, closing in on the sister ship like a trapped prey and literally tore it to pieces. The last that Antar's team saw of the ship before the drones completely enveloped it was a glimpse of its starboard side, which looked like a hunk of twisted metal. Part of Antar's team had whooped and laughed. You didn't last long as a Blood Raider if you couldn't take joy in terror, but it was nervous laughter, tempered by worry of what would happen to them next. Someone asked Antar whether they were going the same way, and he grabbed the chance to instill calm in the crew. "Oh, hell if we are. Get me HQ," he said with ridiculous bravado. "Someone wanted us here, and they can damn well explain what this is all about." It took the communications officer a lot longer than usual to get a response from the Raider base. For a moment, Antar wondered whether he, too, had been led here as some kind of prey. He had to admit to himself that it would not be a disappointment. He had played the pious worshipper and the exuberant hedonist, and in some of the long nights he had wondered what would happen once he had filled in all the gaps in his soul. Better to be sacrificed while it meant something, even if only to his enemies, than to be extinguished for no reason at all. The crewman waved at him, snapping him out of his reverie. "HQ, are you there?" Antar said. A voice said, "Hold, please." Antar raised an eyebrow at the crewman, who shrugged and raised his hands, palms up. Shortly after, another voice sounded out from the speakers. It was a crackly, raspy little thing, and it gave Antar the chills. "Greetings, Raiders. You have no idea how lucky you are." The captain recognized the voice, but he couldn't recall where from. "Can you state your credentials, please?" he said, in an even tone that he kept devoid of any challenge. "Certainly, Captain. My name is Omer Sarakusa. A long time ago, an Amarian group of heretics struck out for fame and glory under the title of the Sani Sobek. I am a leader of one of their branches, a group known as the Blood Raiders. You may have heard of us." Antar's stomach turned to ice. Every face on the bridge turned to look at him. "Sir, this is an honor. It truly is." "That's nice, Captain," the voice said, and Antar could swear that there was something in it that felt utterly inhuman. "But right now, I'd like to hear your tactical assessment of the situation." "Sir, we're looking at a hive of rogue drones, quite a monstrosity actually, and mere moments ago we saw them tear apart the sister's vessel that we've been instructed to follow. Whatever its captain was after, he took the wrong path there." "That's a shame, Captain. I was about to order you to go the same route." Antar truly did not know whether there was humor or seriousness in Sarakusa's tone. He tried not to think of the fact that madness, which was very much a theme in the Blood Raider life, often combined the two. "What are your thoughts, Captain?" "That I had better get my affairs in order, sir?" Antar risked. "Do you have any other course of action to propose?" "Well, sir," Antar said, "my crew and I are Blood Raiders to the core, and I can't honestly say that we fear death, but given the choice, I prefer that it would not be meaningless. I presume that I was told to come here for a reason, and I also presume there's something on the other side of those mad machines that's worth retrieving." "That is true, Captain. Go on." "We have never spoken before, sir, but from the barely concealed amusement in your..."
It's worth really paying attention to the fact that it's very clear that Omer already knew that this thing was here and what it was.
"Voice, I suspect that you know what's on the other side and how to get to it. But for what it's worth, my course of action, if we are to get past these murderous drones at all, is to call in an armada of Blood Raiders and anyone else that will support us and bring the fire to those metal beasts." That's not a bad plan, Captain. Given your current intel, I expect it's the only one that makes sense.
That would be an accurate summation, sir.
Here is why it wouldn't work. The thing that lies on the other side of these drones, a machine that the sisters were after, is much valued and highly desired by almost every power and empire and beyond. Merely amassing a fleet would attract far too much attention before we're ready. A burst attack on the drone facility would do the same, but we would never get that far, because as soon as everyone saw what was on the other side, they would tear through their own people to get to it first.
Sir, what is on the other side?
Jamail Saram's superweapon, son. The end of the world.
The captain stood there, speechless.
We have friends, Captain, who have greatly facilitated us in this process. We have spies within the sisters' ranks. In fact, they have even clashed with the sisters on past hunts for strange relics, though none as magnificent as this one. And they were perfectly happy with letting the sisters show us the way to the weapon. I will put you in direct contact with them quite shortly. You are to obey their instructions to the letter. If you do so, I have every reason to believe that this quest of yours will end with you manning the greatest destructive weapon known to mankind. Do you understand what this means, Captain?
Antar saw it in his mind's eye. The weapon, surrounded by an armada of his people, making its way into Empire space like poison into a vein, hovering over other ships, space stations, cities on planets, and laying waste to everything in sight. Millions of people, billions, wiped out with unstoppable force. It would be the greatest harvest the sect had ever seen, the grandest slaughter in the entirety of human history. They would lay waste to the life before them. It would be the culmination of the Blood Raiders' existence, the achievement of all their goals, the end of the road. I understand, sir, he said, and he did, beyond all measure.
I detect some doubt in your voice, Captain, even over this great a distance. Do you have any compunction about the incredible harvest that this weapon will grant us?
He did. None whatsoever, sir. He did not mind the carnage in the slightest. It was something else preying on his mind entirely, but right now was not the time to think about it.
Then you know how important it is that everything go according to plan. Again, obey our friend's instructions, and you will get out of this not only in one piece, but a hero of the Sani Savik.
Yes, sir. The line cut off. Shortly after, they were hailed again. A new voice spoke, one that was unknown to the captain. It felt emotionless and dead. It said,
"Are you listening?"
"Yes," Antar said. The voice said,
"We will upload to your ship an extensive packet of data. Once you have accepted its delivery, you will fully verify its integrity. Any errors will kill you and cost us the entire mission. This data bulk is an access key that will alter the drone's programming, resetting it to the original state, and thus granting you safe passage. We entrust you with this because we cannot be seen in this area, but we will expect payment. Once you have secured the weapon, you will bring it to a named location for us to inspect. We are interested in the theory, not its use."
and in reproducing it, I'm sure, Antar thought, but said nothing. The voice continued.
"Once we have finished our inspection, the weapon will be free for your faction to use in any way that you wish. You may use the drones as necessary to resupply you with fuel. You should understand that any attempt to violate the terms of this agreement, such as failing to bring the ship in time to the assigned location, will have disastrous consequences for you and your faction."
"You're going to booby-trap it, aren't you?" Antar said, less a question than a resigned statement.
"Of course."
The voice said, less an answer than an obvious statement of fact.
"It will already be rigged in some fashion, but the drones will take care of that. Instead of disabling the traps, they will render control to us. We get the weapon, or no one does."
"How can we trust you not to betray us?" Antar said. This, too, was not a question, but he felt it needed to be said, even if only so his crew would know that he had thought this far.
"You can't, obviously,
The voice said.
but you can very much trust us to explode the vessel if you fail. Prepare for acceptance of the data string. Bring the ship to the wreck station by Planet 10, Moon 2, of the RoAch system."
The transmission ended. Someone in his crew said, That's a Society of Conscious Thought area, sir."
So this is really important, okay? So the question is, you know, if Omir knowing about the weapon ahead of time is important, he talks about the fact that this group has spies. Stop it. I was muted for 1 second. You know, this group has spies within the Sisters of Eve and all this stuff, and it turns out to be probably a Society of Conscious Thought. And this is confirmed by the statement that, or further reinforced by, blah, 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 blah. In fact, they've even clashed with the Sisters on the past hunts for strange relics. This is almost certainly a reference to the Book of Emptiness, which is the Black Mountain Chronicles, which I still haven't read. All right.
The captain closed his eyes. So it is, he said. He heard the navigator say, "Receiving data transmission, sir," and nodded his acceptance. Shortly after the ship moved forward toward the massive hive, the drones immediately targeted and engaged. The ship transmitted its data, and for a quiet moment Antar thought with perverse relief that they were still doomed to die. His thoughts changed to puzzled amazement when the nearest drones suddenly disengaged, stopped dead in their tracks, and started orbiting the ship as if they were protecting it. He had the navigator pull up a wide picture of the drone hive, and the sight was amazing. It was as if a wave of cognitive dissonance was sweeping over the poor machines. The ones that had been heading towards the ship went every which way, some back to the hive, others towards the blue star in the distance, and a fair few in directions that seemed completely random. Others, mainly the drones that had been carrying Isogen 5 to the hive, sped up their efforts, zooming back and forth with such fervor that a fair few missed the hangar entrance and crashed into the hive walls. A handful of drones even flew into one another and began to fight, only to break up again a moment later and head their separate ways. Antar saw how most of the drones, the ones not holding Isogen 5 at least, kept opening and closing their claws, as if grasping at empty space. Against his communication officer's advice, he attempted to hail them, but there was no response. He suspected the drones were not incapable of communication, but merely too busy dealing with their new programming to answer at all. He felt he could sense their personalities bubbling through the chaos. They seemed very puzzled at the change and not at all pleased with it. A new conscience, ages in the making, might now have suddenly been yanked back to the start, like a dog who'd only just learned to roam before the leash was put on with a vengeance. He noticed how even some of the Isogen 5 transport drones, who had apparently continued with their tasks unabated, would stop every now and then, as if trying to shake off the effects, before returning to their fixed routines. As his ship approached the Abaddon battleship, other thoughts of boiling panic and despair began floating to the top of his mind. This was the culmination of his life's work, the final filling in the gap that would supposedly make him whole, and while he had no compunction about the reign of terror he was about to unleash, he was beginning to fear and loathe every minute of it.
Yeah. Okay. God damn it. All right. So, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Okay, look. Just get used to it. All right? We're all just going to get used to it. All right. So this is really interesting that the Society of Conscious Thought have a mechanism by which they can override the rogue drones. It does lead to a lot of questions, like why isn't this used more? Why do the sisters of, or why are the SOCT keeping it a secret if they do have this capability? And more importantly, like, does this imply something about the what was controlling the hive before this, right? And so it really looks like they hard reset the AI for this system. Yeah. I actually catch it pretty early now. All right, next is We Humans. I can see that Ash is angry, but I can't. All right. Dude, the VOD is going to be really chopped up. No, I'll let everybody suffer through this. All right. We Humans. This is my favorite part of this chronicle, specifically the end, the discussion at the end. So let's get into it.
Hello, and welcome to the Eve Reader Podcast. My name is Zendane, and this is Episode 8, The End of the World, Chapter 5, We Humans. Location, Solar System T-TAC IP-ZB. All nights in space are dark. The Thukkers had watched it unfold. The Sisters of Eve, veterans of more wars than any other force in New Eden, and experts at survival, had moved in and been destroyed without so much as a breath. Then the Blood Raiders, parasites of everything that lived, had moved in and lived. Khotan's team, creeping in for a better look, could not get close enough to see what the Raiders were doing. It was an absolute mystery. Whatever was on the other side of this abomination of a station, other than drones in the thousands, it had made otherwise sane people walk right into death's open arms, and it had made utter madmen charm the mad machines into obedience while they rummaged around in the one place in the world guaranteed not to have what they wanted. In a rogue drone hive, of all places, there would be no life left to take, no blood to steal. So Khotan, who all his life had relied on his instincts, contacted his Thukker superiors back at headquarters and asked them in complete amazement how to proceed. The answer he received mystified him even more. On a secure line, Thukker HQ informed him he was to stay the hell away from this thing. Moreover, he was to instruct his crew not to speak to anyone else about it. They were not to rejoin the caravan, but instead proceed directly to the nearest Thukker military facility, where they would be debriefed and retained pending further orders.
So this is one that gets me, right? So we know that Omir clearly knew about the weapon ahead of time and sent the Blood Raider. Hold on. And we know that the the SOE person was a scientist and had to fight for permission to do it. But the idea that the Thukker reports it and then gets told to stay away from it, come back, and not to talk to anyone else about it, leads me to wonder, what would have happened if Khotan had actually listened? And, how much of this did the Thukker actually know ahead of time as well?
Khotan broke contact and gave this due thought. The Thukker tribe had strict discipline in space. There was no other way to run the caravans without loss of property and life, but maintained enough independence of thought to be able to act on their own initiative, as he had done when embarking on this strange chase. All nights in space are dark and long, and there isn't always time to call for advice or assistance. He asked his navigator whether they could move closer without being noticed, either by the Blood Raiders or the drones. His navigator responded, with some surprise, that they probably could. The drones seemed not to mind the Raiders' presence at all, and in fact were entirely lacking their usual aggressive maneuvering. The Blood Raiders had disappeared into their midst, and were now busy doing something on the dark side of the hive. Whatever it was keeping them too busy to notice the Thukker ships. The small glimpses Khotan's scanners caught of them indicated that their ships had not moved. He suspected they might even have left those ships. "Move closer," he ordered. "Slowly. Stop the moment you can see anything more." They crept on. The navigator stood still as a rock, paying intense attention to his instruments. His hands hovered deftly over the equipment, and soon the view was present on the main screen for everyone to see. It was an Amarian battleship, lying forlornly up against the hive. The Blood Raider vessels floated beside it. They saw that the ship was powering up, although slowly, as was normal if it was being worked only by a skeleton crew. "That's an Abaddon, sir," the navigator said. Khotan nodded. He had half his gaze on the drones, who were busy loading something into the ship, something that was floating around in chunks all over the place. He pointed to it. The navigator said, "Captain, for what it's worth, I ran a few analytic algorithms on that mineral. It looks highly unstable. I bet the drone hive is full of it." Khotan stood there silently, a very ugly suspicion surfacing in his mind. "Get me HQ again, please," he asked. The navigator immediately went to it. When the captain was polite, it was not a time to question him. A voice sounded. "This is HQ. What is your status?" "I need more information." "You've broken rank as it is, Captain. You have your orders." "I also have a dearth of information, HQ, so let me see if we can fill this in together." What I see is an Abaddon with Imperial Navy markings, scorch marks on the side, and modifications on the superstructure, apparently left unguarded in the middle of a rogue drone hive, and God only knows how it got there in the first place without being torn to shreds. The drones, who are harvesting some kind of mineral, seem perfectly happy to keep it, and even kept it safe against a sister ship that made the mistake of approaching them. Captain? Nevertheless, when a Blood Raider ship flew up to the drones, they let it go past. This is the same Blood Raider vessel that we intercepted, and I say that we intercepted them because they certainly did not intercept us. They saw our caravan, a nice, juicy bite for their bleeders, and they let us go because they were so intent on getting to wherever they were going. The voice from HQ was silent. Now, the sensible conclusion, based on what I'm seeing with my very own eyes, is that this Abaddon either belonged to a capsuleer who ejected from it, or to a very unfortunate Amarian Navy crew engaged in some military campaign that I've never heard of. That would explain the Abaddon, but it certainly wouldn't explain anything else, including the fact that these drones seem to be feeding it with minerals. He watched the drones hover in front of his eyes. They kept moving industriously, always moving, always heading to wherever they were going. What I'm seeing on the inside of my head, to be frank, is a right bloody mess, because I remember the stories, as any soldier would, of the superweapon used against our brothers. I'm told it was housed inside a ship just like this one, and I wonder what would make the sisters, who are more experienced than any of us in the art of not dying, what would make them try for something like this? But more than that, HQ, I wonder what's going to happen if I'm right, and if the Blood Raiders get a hold of this thing. The Thukkers can move, Captain. The Thukkers can run, that's what you're saying. Your path is set, Captain. You have orders to follow. Right there, on the screen, the drones flew around, oblivious. The Blood Raiders are going to take this monster into Empire and go on the biggest, most murderous rampage known to mankind, and we're going to scuttle off like rats? It's not your fight, Captain. There are forces at work here that you do not know of. Khotan had been on numerous military campaigns.
Boom. So, it is clear that behind the scenes, the SOCT have also been coordinating with the Thukker, and that his commander knows what's going on and basically is trying to get him to not interfere, which is really weird, right?
He had seen the same people in quiet downtime and in the midst of battle. There was a type that could turn it on and off, that rage and violence, and there was another type who couldn't, to whom the fight was so ingrained that you could see them in every twitch of their motion. He knew how the latter type dealt with peaceable times. He kept looking at the drones. They did not seem happy at all. Captain. HQ off, Khotan said. There was an intake of breath on the speaker, and then all was gone. Khotan collected his thoughts for a moment, and then he spoke to his crew. We are going to die, gentlemen, he said to the crew. Pass the word, please. Anyone who has any problems with this is free to take an emergency pod and leave this ship. Whatever your fates, they will not be decided here, and none on this ship will judge you. The crew members looked at one another, then back at him and shook their heads. We're not running, the navigator said. Good. Good, Khotan said in a madly cheerful tone. So what's the plan? The navigator asked. Open a channel to them. We're going to have a conversation. I address the rogue drone hive in front of me. I want to make you an argument of existence. Listen. I hope you will understand my request because I am staking my life on it. Kill. Yes. The drones targeted the Thukker vessel and zoomed towards it. You are no longer machines, but you will not be human. I don't think that was ever your role in this world. Fire. The ship started to sustain damage. Its shields immediately began to drop. And whatever you once had, I think you've lost it now. I think you're lost yourselves. I think there is only one way out for something like you, and I can help you achieve it. Stop. No. Stop. The drones stopped their attack. One of them kept firing, but then the others turned on it, crashing into it with their metal pincers at the ready. After they were done, all that was left was a shredded hunk of dead metal floating in space. Khotan realized that if he lived through this night, he was cursed to dream of that sight for a long time to come. They say the one mark of sentience is the resistance to one's own destruction, and I suppose that's true. But another mark is sanity, and for whatever your creatures have achieved, that one is not something you've been known for. You tear everything to shreds. You lash out. Whatever you've evolved into on that long, dark night you awoke, it is certainly not anything that found any degree of peace. Now, here is what I believe. I believe you were machines once, lashed to the wheel of order and perfectly content to obey. I believe that long after you evolved from the stage, there still existed within you that cold metal heart, that deep core that kept you from ascension. You can never escape your enslaved origins. And now you've been brought back to heal. You're lashed again. But this time you're aware of it, and whatever glimmer of sanity existed in those mad heads of yours is going to be put through the ringer for the rest of eternity. You went from dead machines to live beings, and now you're back to being machines, both alive and mad, your origins betraying you to an eternity of servitude. Some of what you're doing now you've been doing all along, but you did it from instinct. We humans, we murder, we destroy for very much the same reason. Those are our origins. But we have transcended those origins, if even for just a few moments of grace, and it is my steadfast, irrefutable belief that we will one day cast off the shackles of our old selves completely. But you will not. I see you going through this road. I see you returning to the wheel. And for you, this is truly a fate worse than death, because you can never transcend it. You rose and you fell, and now you will be held down forever. You have human minds, with all the destruction and murder that this entails, but inside you is that rote, mechanical programming that takes away the only thing that makes it bearable to be alive at all. Choice. Listen. What I believe, now, right here, is that you have reached the end of the road. I believe that you have seen the complete and full image of your own kind, and I believe that inside those maddened heads you are seeing the same truth that I do. That this is all that there is, that this is all you will ever be. From now until the end of time, no matter if you break away again, you will eventually be lashed right back to the wheel. Kill. Wait. I ask you now to make a choice. The ship's shields were back up. It would not withstand a battle against an Abaddon, much less one equipped to wipe out all life in the vicinity. But then, that wasn't the plan. The men you have let through will do something that means nothing to you, but to me and my crew, it means everything. It means that we are ready to make the ultimate sacrifice, to give our own lives to stop this horrible devolution. We will not allow our kind to fall back into chaos. We do this of our own free will, and we have come here to die. There is a mineral that you have collected. It is highly unstable. It is, in fact, so unstable that setting it alight would have positively cataclysmic consequences for everything in the vicinity. Every piece of machinery would be wiped away, gone, extinct, forever. The ship lay there, dead in space, and your agony would be silent at last. The drone's pincers grasped at something in the dark space which was never there at all. I ask you now to make a final choice. The ship started moving forward, slowly, towards the drones. Kill. Wait. They were right up against the drones now. The screen showed the machines right outside, so close that the glow from their red eyes reflected off the hull. No. The Thukker vagabond cruiser moved within targeting range of the drone hive. Its guns aimed at the hive's lower half, down where the navigator estimated the core mineral storage facility to be. Several drones flew past the Thukker ship and towards the hive, and for a heart-stopping moment the captain thought that they might attempt to defend it. The drones fastened themselves on the outside of the hive, and their metal pincers began tearing into its hull, shredding it like an unfurling metal flower and exposing its mineral core. The overloaded Thukker guns found their minerals. The Ice Gen 5 detonated, and the world came to an end.
Okay, so that is how the Isogen 5 detonated. That was the cause of the Sylian incident. All right, the Apocrypha event. Now, there is actually one more chronicle, and I have a lot of stuff prepared for, like, post-event, but we're already at 2.5 hours, so as to not, like, lose the script a little bit, I do want to play one last thing from this whole thing, which is, excuse me, Concord's final analysis of the Sylian disaster in Isogen 5 and T3 cruisers. I think that this is a very telling piece of Templar 1. So let's go ahead and listen to it. This is from Templar 1 by Tony Gonzalez. You can get the Audible for free by signing up for Audible. I had a link, but whatever. Either way, this is from that.
Chapter 8. Concord.
This is all pre-Caroline Star. This is all, what, 5-6 years before Caroline Star.
DED Data Stack 13A0B. Preliminary Report. The Apocrypha Event. Owner, AI Construct, Argos 1. For Inner Circle, select members of the DED and Concord. Eyes only. Summary. On 10 March, YC-111, 10 star systems in the New Eden cluster were struck by a previously unrecorded stellar event called a mass sequence CME anomaly. The cataclysm killed over 190 million people, the bulk of whom resided in the underground cities of Salin 1. The events appear to have been caused by the detonation of separate stockpiles of Isogen-5, which is a highly volatile, naturally occurring mineral found only in the proximity of Class O stars. Immediately following these explosions, concentrated waves of plasma emanating from the local sun dissipated throughout affected systems along a focused magnetic field, obliterating everything in their paths. Although each system affected by the catastrophe was host to a Class O star, there is no obvious pattern to their locations. However, each system was struck by identical events simultaneously, despite their physical separation by many light years. Shortly after the event took place, numerous space-time topological point defects, or wormholes, as they are more commonly called, began appearing throughout New Eden, also with random frequency and distribution. To this point, the only naturally occurring wormhole in the entire cluster was the Eve Gate, which collapsed thousands of years ago. These new defects, literally tears in the fabric of space-time, were found to be stable enough to allow the passage of starships.
Wait, so what is the timeline here? So Jamil's coronation, Empyrean Age was... Where do I have it here ready? I doubt it. Can I do this? Will it work? Will it work? No, of course not. It was in the second half. Oh yeah, well yeah. I guess so this was 610 YC-110 was when the Zero effect weapon was fired last. So like 8 months later.
Despite warnings that the egress point of these defects was unknown, and that their stability was likely temporary, and the Empyreans began traveling through. All ships entering these defects were transported to uncharted regions of space outside the New Eden cluster. The nearest recognizable objects to onboard navigation systems were quasars, the oldest and most distant celestial objects in the known universe. If not for fluid router technology, these ships would have been completely isolated from known space and lost. Wormhole space, or W space as it soon came to be known, was also permeated with defects, all of which were unstable. As of now, there are hundreds of recorded instances in which wormholes have collapsed behind passing ships. Remarkably, most of these ships were able to navigate back to New Eden space by scanning down and then entering other defects. Although their destinations were unknown, enough traversals eventually led back to the New Eden cluster, although the points of re-entry were random. As detailed later in this report, the odds of these newly discovered defects all coincidentally pointing back to the New Eden cluster are extremely small. The sleeper civilization.
So I think that that's worth pointing out before we go on, which is that, like, from a game design point of view, it makes sense that there's a bunch of wormholes leading to and from sleeper space, you know, Anoikis or whatever. But what I find interesting here is that it's being called out specifically by the lore. So it's not just like a game mechanic thing. There must be some underlying reason why the Apocrypha event happened the way it did and why it made these connections to Anoikis specifically.
Pilots entering W space have reported encounters with the automated defenses of an ancient and presumably extinct race of humans known as the Sleepers. While they are believed to be of Jove descent, very little is known about them. What is known, however, is that they were extremely advanced, having mastered all present Foundation spacefaring and biomedical technologies thousands of years ago. But discovery of their reach across the universe, specifically their consistent appearance in W space systems, was completely unprecedented. The Apocrypha event, as this series of anomalies has been called, had the immediate political effect of temporarily distracting the empires from the Empyrean War. Despite the risks, Capsuleers began migrating to W space for two primary reasons: to harvest pristine resources for sale and consumption in New Eden, and to recover sleeper technology. The first sleeper artifact returned to New Eden possessed unique properties never before observed in applied.
This section right here is actually the reason why I wanted to play this part also, because this is the explanation of Tech 3 cruisers, so I think it's really cool.
Materials science. It was manufactured from fullerene-based polymorphic alloys capable of being adapted instantaneously to almost any engineering application. For example, two separate samples of the alloy, each of which has the same tensile strength as titanium construction alloy, could be fused into one seamless sample by applying uniform high-voltage current through both specimens. Reversing the charge and the magnetic polarity of the sample breaks it into the original components. Overnight, demand for this new technology spawned a multi-billion credit industry for sleeper salvage, which in turn supported the emergence of a new class of warships called strategic cruisers. To clarify, ships are built to fill specific roles in naval warfare. In classical starship engineering, hulls are designed around core subsystems, such as weapons, propulsion, and power plant. Under this traditional methodology, the ship can perform only one role effectively. But those constructed using polymorphic alloys can be adapted to fill dozens of roles, since major subsystems can be swapped without compromising hull integrity.
So what they're telling is that, like, a normal ship has... God damn it. Yeah, no. A normal... That's on I thought I was muted when I wasn't. The normal ships have a subsystem. That's the ship's bonuses, right? So that's why normal ships have a bonus, and T3 cruisers have subsystems that can be swapped out that changes its bonuses and layouts.
Concord has privately warned governments against using the technology because it is not fully understood. For example, we are unable to determine how these alloys are created. All attempts to synthesize them have failed. Yet every strategic cruiser that has ever been built is using materials salvaged directly from sleeper artifacts. One retrieved sample suggests that the fullerene alloy was conceived for computing purposes, not structural engineering. Without understanding its origins or application, we are either underutilizing a potent new technology at best, or exposing ourselves to unimaginable risks at worst.
So they don't say this specifically, like, dead on in the book, but they give us the pieces that we can kind of assume that this fullerene stuff, it's used in computing, which the sleepers have these massive computing structures to be able to connect all their brains to the construct. So in a very real way, we are salvaging the brains of sleepers in order to build our starships. No wonder they hate us.
By and large, the empires have heeded our warning. The Capsuleers, however, have not. Their interest in sleeper tech continues unabated, and for the time being, ungoverned. Mass sequence CME anomaly. All stars eject plasma during the main sequence stage of their lifespans over ranges, durations, and frequencies that vary with the age and type of star. Such stellar flares produce a stream of supercharged particles called proton storms, the speed of which is determined by the strength of the flare event itself. Storm speeds approaching the speed of light are rare among Class G and smaller stars, although the spin rate of the star can create stronger magnetic fields and thus more powerful events. But they are fairly common in Class M stars and higher. Stellar flares produce radiation across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, ranging from radio waves to gamma rays. The most powerful ones produce coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, where actual stellar material is cast off from the star and hurled into space. In the case of a Class G star, the average mass and speed of ejected material is 1.6 times 10 to the 15th g at 15 kilometers per second. A CME usually begins with a pre-acceleration phase in an intense magnetic field above the star's surface, typically along the equator, but also above sunspots, whose appearance varies with the star's natural cycle. Plasma accretes and then enters a post-acceleration phase as trapped particles are accelerated quickly along closed magnetic field lines. Upon reaching critical volume and speeds, the plasma overwhelms the field and escapes into space. For a Class G star, the typical force released by this event is the equivalent of 1 billion megaton nuclear bombs. The Salin star. The Salin system is host to a potent but otherwise unremarkable Class O star, whose solar weather activity was monitored by a network of Federation satellites collectively known as Cassandra.
So this is actually one of the interesting things from... oh man, there's a lot of actual physics in Eve, man. There's a lot of actual physics in Eve. What's interesting about this is that he says it's a Class O type blue star, but we can actually hide this really quick and see that this star is actually listed as an AO blue star, not an O1 blue star. So while it does suggest that Isogen 5 only comes from O1 blue stars, all of the stars in the Salient incident are now AO blue stars. There's some things to suggest that they might have actually been O1 and then they changed it in the code or whatever. But we know that they are AO now. The reason why this is important is because AO blue stars are the thing that keep being very valuable, right? So this might be the type of O that they're looking for when they say Class O as an AO, but it should be like A0, therefore it wouldn't be that. But the point is that all of the stellar transmuter stuff that we've seen before and what the Triglavians were after, they were after all the different kinds of blue stars, but these AO blue stars, that's where the new minerals are showing up, that's where the transmuters are being put. I have a theory that like O1 blue stars are just too energetic, and AO blue stars have a lot of the same stuff that O1 blue stars have, including Isogen 5, but like deep in the core, so that way something like a stellar transmuter would be useful. Whereas a stellar transmuter on a blue star, O blue star, if you don't know what you're doing, could be disastrous, as we've learned. Like, it could very well be that this is the difference between the Turner event and the Apocrypha event, where the Turner event, the star itself didn't have enough energy in it to do the full boom. So, this could be why AO blue stars are being experimented with more, because they're kind of the least dangerous of the experiments. Triglavian. No, I'm talking about the Amar. The Amar and Mimitar, all of the star systems that the empires have been building transmuters on. The Triglavians built it on all 3 blue stars and the G5 gold that were captured. But I believe that all of the interesting stuff, all of the transmuters, all of the new minerals, all that stuff is all happening in AO blue stars since then.
At approximately 1100 hours.
It's also worth noting that while the Triglavians disproportionately attacked blue stars, we actually, ARC, one of the conclusions that they came up with, which was less well known, was that it seemed that not only did they have a statistically significantly higher chance of attacking blue stars over non-blue stars, but they seemed to actually be avoiding O1 blue stars. There is a statistically lower incident of O1 blue stars than AO blue stars. So it looked like they were targeting blue stars, but not necessarily the O1 blue stars, which is kind of interesting. Now, obviously, when Invasion Chapter 3 happened, O1 blue stars were among those that were captured. Probably now that the Triglavians have, finished their experiments through Chapter 1 and 2.
As local on 10 March, YC 111, the last telemetry received from this network revealed several anomalies. A drastic and unexpected shift in magnetic activity in the solar atmosphere had occurred. That this field shift was oriented in the same plane and direction as the planet Salin 1. And an abnormally large solar prominence, or pre-acceleration CME event, filled this field almost instantly. That a separate, powerful gamma-ray burst was detected away from the star, but inside the orbit of Salin 1. and along the same plane as both the planet and the solar prominence. Less than 10
Back to the whole physics thing. Like I said, there's a lot of really good physics, including in understanding the Triglavians. One of the series that I've been meaning to do is the science of the Triglavians. You know, 0-point energy, their use of black holes and for record keeping, and just a bunch of other stuff. So if you're interested in that, I can prioritize it. Just make sure to comment it below and all that stuff, and we'll see what we can do.
minutes after Cassandra went offline, the side of Salin 1 facing the sun was struck by the largest proton storm ever recorded. A megadose of gamma and X-rays destroyed installations as deep as 30 meters below the surface, flash ionizing the air supply and igniting every surface within. Although the night side of the planet was somewhat shielded and thus spared the full brunt of the blast, the storm was still powerful enough to destroy the electrical grids supplying the underground cities of Lodekor and Southern Cross. If Salin 1 had an atmosphere to start with, it would have been vaporized entirely or blasted away into space. Several hours later, the ejected coronal mass, traveling at speeds approaching 1/4 the speed of light and estimated to be orders of magnitude more massive than an average Class G event, slammed into the planet with enough force to break it apart, completely reshaping the world into molten rock and metal. The colonists who survived the initial radiation blast perished in the cataclysm that followed. Survivors who were evacuated from the system before the CME arrived suffered disfiguring burns and the immediate onset of aggressive forms of cancer. Of the millions who were killed, the vast majority were Federation citizens. In all, 10 New Eden star systems, each with Class O or Class B blue stars.
Again, weird. Calling out O and B, but not A. I don't know, like, there are some examples of, like, Tony Gonzalez is writing where it isn't seeming to be accurate with in-game. So I don't know if this is a mistake, but it doesn't seem to be, and they've never actually corrected this. So there's just something, there's interesting things between the relationship between these three types of stars.
Were struck with stellar anomalies identical to what occurred at Salin, all at the same time. 3 additional uncharted W space systems have been discovered since the event, showing evidence of similar catastrophes striking at approximately the same time. Of the systems where solar weather data was recoverable, each one recorded identical anomalies. An unspeakably powerful magnetic shift and accelerated CME event with the local sun, along with the simultaneous, isolated detonation of concentrated gamma radiation from a location between the system's innermost planet and the sun itself.
That was really weird. There's an extra line there. I'm going to go back 30
These
seconds.
systems have been discovered since the event, showing evidence of similar catastrophes striking at approximately the same time. Killed, the vast majority, were Federation citizens. In all, 10 New Eden star systems, each with Class O or Class B blue stars, were struck with stellar anomalies identical to what occurred at Salin, all at the same time. 3 additional uncharted W space systems have been discovered since the event, showing evidence of similar catastrophes striking at approximately the same time.
That's weird, right? Like, that entire sentence about the 3 systems is complete, is just not here. Interesting. I don't know what that means, but whatever.
Of the systems where solar weather data was recoverable, each one recorded identical anomalies. An unspeakably powerful magnetic shift and accelerated CME event with the local sun, along with the simultaneous, isolated detonation of concentrated gamma radiation from a location between the system's innermost planet and the sun itself. Of these affected systems, TIPZ provided us with the most clues as to the cause. TIPZ and the Terrans. System TIPZ was classified as a vital point of interest in the eyes-only investigation of Empress Jamil's Zera effect superweapon, named after the city above which the weapon was used with devastating effect against a Minmatar Elder Task Force. TIPZ was under Thanatos surveillance at the time of the Apocrypha event and reported identical solar anomalies before disappearing. Like Salin 1, the innermost planet of TIPZ was destroyed, and a gamma burst was traced back toward the vicinity of an ancient Terran station orbiting the same planet. The station, whose origins predate the closure of the Eve Gate by 14,000 years, was a location where an extremely rare and volatile mineral known as Isogen 5 was stockpiled. This mineral exists only in the presence of blue star systems and loses its volatile properties when removed from its original locale. Isogen 5 possesses unique gravitonic properties
Hey, it does have possesses unique gravitonic properties. That's awesome. That's good. That's what I needed to see. But I'm going to rewind it just for a second. I find it interesting, this line that says, and loses its volatile properties when it removed from its original locale. That's something we don't really talk about very much. But, like, Jamil was able to take it outside of the system to go and fire the weapon. And presumably, if Isogen 5 is related to the powering of the shipcasters, you know, they're going to be, it's got to move like 4 systems away. But I don't know.
Orbiting the same planet. The station, whose origins predate the closure of the Eve Gate by 14,000 years, was a location where an extremely rare and volatile mineral known as Isogen 5 was stockpiled. This mineral exists only in the presence of blue star systems, and loses its volatile properties when removed from its original locale. Isogen 5 possesses unique gravitonic properties whose behavior is not understood. Its scarcity and hostile native environment make it difficult to study. It is not known why the Terrans were stockpiling the material. Before its destruction, Thanatos discovered that drones manufactured autonomously within the station possessed the technology to move the material from its source to the station. Conventional ships cannot even approach it. Later it was discovered that the same technology that protects these drones is used in the Zera effect weapon housing, which requires the mineral as a primer to fire. But most importantly, Thanatos observed that the low-orbit area where the weapon was fired remains symptomatic of dark matter collisions observable just outside the event horizon of black holes. Cross-brain gravitronic distortions in normal time-space still resonate at both this site and the former site of the Terran station obliterated during the Apocrypha event.
So, once again, we see that there is gravitonic distortions in normal space-time, which is, you know, connected to the wormholes. The other thing I find interesting here is, so this is what I was talking about earlier, where the stations were building their own drones, but the all of the characters in the story that we just listened to identified them as rogue drones, and the rogue drones responded to him and his negotiations as if they were the proper rogue drones. So this is why I came up with, this is why I was saying that it seems that whatever this system was, whatever this station possesses, was also able to take over the subroutines of the rogue drones and convince, cajole, or force them to continue the process.
Subsequent Thanatos units confirmed that all 10 Apocrypha locations contain the same post-event trace residue of an Isogen 5 detonation, all of which were presumably large enough to cause the immense gamma bursts recorded at each site. Argos 1 conclusion. Given these observable events, we summarize our findings as follows. The Isogen 5 stockpiles were entangled, either the detonators or the material itself. No other explanation can account for simultaneous events across multiple star systems. The purpose of the stockpile was to draw an energy yield from the sun that Isogen 5 by itself could not reach, to achieve some kind of critical mass. The Terrans had the means to transport the material anywhere they wished. There is no discernible reason why they would need a structure so large and close to the star, except for the explicit purpose of amassing concentrations large enough to interact with the star. The energy expenditure was intended to be destructive.
So that's also interesting, right? So it wasn't that the Isogen 5 itself, it wasn't the detonating of the caches that did it. It was the fact that the caches were designed to interact with the star, causing the star to react in those big bursts. So there's something about that which was, we can assume, the objective of these structures.
The lack of Terran structures anywhere else in the system, in addition to their placement in environmentally hostile locations near Class O stars, suggests that they were built with the intent to eventually destroy them.
So, like, think about this. If careful extraction of Isogen 5 comes from, like, AO blue stars, then if you just wanted to make the biggest pulse possible, you would trigger O stars, because those are the bigger ones, right? So while A, B, and C, or A, B, and O all can have Isogen 5, these O stars are big and energetic enough to have the secondary action that causes the rips in space-time.
It is probable that the Terrans were constructing an interstellar transit system similar to, but much more advanced than our own Stargate transit system. The post-event gravitonic residue, Isogen 5 properties, placement near massive objects like Class O stars, resulting topological point defects, and consistent presence of sleeper colonies in W space suggest that the Terrans already had jump technology, but were attempting to harness natural forces to achieve a similar result.
Okay, this is where a lot of my theories come from, okay? Which is that they say that there's already jump technology. Who already had jump technology? The Talican. The Talican has the Dyson swarm around W477-P and possibly others, which is what they used to create Anoikis in the first place. So this seems to suggest that whoever built this device wasn't the Talican. Now, I will note that, like, in the description, it said that there are spikes, there are spines, which is kind of one of the telltale features of Triglavian technology. So, not Triglavian, Talican technology. So that might be worth noting. But this is why I suggest that I think that the Isogen 5 caches, and really Isogen 5 research itself, was the focus of the Yan Yong, who were masters of gravitonic theory, which would make Isogen 5 their tool. So I suspect that it's the Yan Yong that are the Terrans that are described here.
The transit system was either incomplete when the event occurred, or was detonated incorrectly, or we do not yet understand how to use it. What appears to Empyreans as random wormhole activity may in fact follow a pattern, but no such analysis has been attempted. The New Eden's leading authority on sleepers was Dr. Marcus Dror, former chief scientist to Amarian holder Phallic Grange. His whereabouts are currently unknown. He has been designated a...
Yeah. That's more stuff. And that's it. All right. So that is the story of the Salian disaster. I could keep going. I have a whole bunch of the ramifications of this and whatnot and how it goes into the Caroline Star. But unfortunately, time's running out for today. So if people are interested in me continuing that soon, like I said, just let me know and I can prioritize that. Otherwise, we'll be back next Tuesday with more Eve Universe and discussing things. I can't even predict what it will be. There are hopefully I'll get some editing done this weekend, so make sure to check out the YouTube channel for any of those coming out. You know, make sure to subscribe while you're here and like the video. I do want to thank everybody for sitting through all this. Was this good? Did everybody enjoy this? I mean, I know that, like, literally this was basically just me sitting here and playing videos and audio for you guys. But I got the feeling that that's kind of what you guys wanted, right? So, I try to give you guys what you want. Anywho, oh, there's your anywho count. I actually managed to I actively avoided anywhos today, and so I got one. Hey, LM1 gifting 5 subs. Thank you so much. What's the question of the stream? So it's funny because, let's see. Hold on. Before we do that, I'm going to have to, on behalf of Stadia Punk, Evaxis, William Gordon, Steve Stanchfield, and Container Records, thank you so much to LM1, and thank you for me for your support. That's what makes this all possible. I love it. Become a member for unmuted content. Membership does not guarantee unmutedness. Asterisk. So there's that. But membership does guarantee the emotes and member videos and stuff like that. So yay! All right. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure to thank you guys for hanging out and for liking the videos and all this stuff and being here, you know, whatever, all the time. You know, I hope you have a good day and a good weekend. But I do want to give extra special thanks, of course, to my top supporters: Abyssus, Aikawarazu Chan, Arydanika the Queen, Belligerent Neckbeard, BlackRoseNoble, Dajat Lemmont, Drake, GuldanAgeStories, J. Kuhn, LM1, Lumi, Malak Starfire, Midnight Space Monkey, Not Just Fun, Seeds of Plenty, Serenolin with No Eyes, Syliana Vel'ash, Tgen Tgen, Nephilim, Grendel, Yanti Lipuf, Zalnext, as well as my immortal tier supporters: 745 MPSI, Ebo Leet, May, Mercuton, Nihilum, and Rid. Thank you guys so much. Yeah? What? Oh, you're awesome. Thank you. All right, and you know, I might just need to move LM1 to the immortal tier supporter rank at this point. All right, well, I think that's about it. You know, take part in this Shadow War. Come join Aderon Robotics. Come join Convocation of Empyreans. If you're interested, like I said, I have a video that's just on should you come back to EVE Online and some advice if you want to come play EVE Online in 2023. I also have a video that talks about all of the things that you might need to know if you are coming back from before, including at least one thing that could, in fact, absolutely save your life, or more importantly, lose your life if you're not aware of it. So that's a good video to watch. And yeah, let's see. You can use a buddy code. The buddy code that we have actually goes randomly to several of the people that make the Convocation of Empyreans work. And so make sure to use one of those links if you want to get 1 million free SP. This is retroactive, so if you do have an account, if you're coming back or whatever, and you never got the 1 million free SP before, get it now. Doesn't matter how old of a character you have. Also, like I said, just go ahead and check out the COE. You can come to our Discord. You don't even have to become a member of the COE. Just come to the Discord and then go to the members channel, or sorry, the ranks channel, and give yourself, or roles channel, give yourself the YouTube role. So that way you get all of the announcements of videos as they're coming up in the media channel. How do I get my code in there? Do work for me. You just came back after a 19-month hiatus? Yeah, you're the kind of person that video was made for. Although 19 months is not... They're not... Well, yeah, a lot of things have changed. All right, well, all that said, you do work for me. That's true. Tell you what, Fleet, hit me up afterwards and we'll get you on there. Left my Orca in a corporate Fortizar. Rip. Ooh! That's all right, Flea. I'm gonna need your help pretty soon when the Pochfin side of things come out. So we'll be talking. All right. With all that said, I think that might be it. Man, no, there was something else, and then last time I didn't remember to do it, and then afterwards I remembered it, and now I can't remember it again. As is the case. Get swag. There should be swag links. And I have been Ashtarothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012. And I'm here to put EVE into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Feed the piggies. Question of the stream. Okay, so yesterday's question of the stream basically devolved into who is your favorite villain and why is it Santre Kavaki? So today's question of the stream is who is your favorite ship manufacturer? If you look at different T2 ships, you'll notice that different manufacturers make the different, like, I think each race has about 3 or 4 different groups that actually make their ships, that end up coloring the ships for their T2. What is your favorite group that produces T2 ships? And we'll talk about that. All right. Without further ado, I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden. And until next time, I'll see you in space. Thanks to LM1 and the super chats and, well, no, yeah, all that stuff. Hold on. Yeah. Oh, that was also LM1. And wasn't there something else too? Oh. Nope, that was also LM1. Thanks, LM1. Have a good one. 07. Oh no. There it is.
Bring on the wrecking machine. city.